Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 most haunted cemeteries in Florida, we step through the rusted gates of graveyards where names are carved in stone. Flowers wither overnight, and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling accounts of bells that toll without wind, whispers leaking from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps echoing across gravel paths when you know you are utterly alone. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers watch and leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Before we begin, share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there is a cemetery in your town that unsettles you, type its name. Because once you step past the gates of these haunted resting grounds, not everything allows you to leave. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a slow breath, and let us begin. I wasn't planning to stop at a cemetery on my way home from a work conference, but St. Augustine has a way of turning detours into decisions. It was late September, the air still heavy and warm even at night, and the old city was packed with slow-moving tourists and the smell of fried dough. I had 2 friends with me, Mia, who lives for anything spooky and had been texting me about the haunted cemetery tour since I landed in Florida, and her cousin Mark, who was skeptical about everything but a good sport about watching us get scared. We parked on a side street where the palms creaked and sighed and walked toward the iron gates. I remember the humidity felt like a hand resting on my chest. The streetlights made the Spanish moss look like wet hair hanging from the oaks. The Huguenot Cemetery sits right across from the old city gates, and the way the road curves there made it feel like we were stepping into a pocket of time that the city kept out of convenience. Like an attic, you tell yourself you'll clean next weekend, but never do. A tour group had gathered by the fence, a guide with a lantern, maybe a dozen people, and a security guard leaning on the low wall with the kind of posture that says he's seen every kind of nonsense. There was also a sign asking visitors to be respectful and keep off the graves. The gate was padlocked, but the fence was low enough to peer over. The guide was a woman in her 40s with a plain voice, the sort of voice you trust in a storm. She introduced herself as Elaine and told us the basics. The cemetery opened in 1821. A lot of yellow fever victims, a lot of quick burials, a lot of grief that didn't get a chance to become anything else. That would have been enough for me to feel weird. But then she pointed to the entrance and said, "This is where people see him, a pale man. Some say he's a fever victim. Some say he was buried without family, without his name. He's said to hang back by the gate and watch. He's waiting for someone to call his name." I felt Mia nudge me, excited. Mark rolled his eyes but stayed quiet. I need to say this up front because it matters. I don't do well with stories about names. I'm not superstitious and I'm not religious, but when I was a kid, my grandfather would tell me that names are like keys. Once something has your name, it can open the door you didn't know you were guarding. It stuck with me, even if I always assumed he was just trying to keep me from talking to strangers. I kept my hands in my pockets and my mouth shut as Elaine went on. She talked about the headstones leaning as though listening, and the way photographs taken at the entrance sometimes show a smudge or a figure the photographer swears wasn't there. She told us to keep our voices down and never answer if we heard our names from the other side of the fence. "People steal, people trespass," she said. "Sometimes they call to get your attention. Don't engage. If you hear your name inside the cemetery, it's not for you." The group shifted like one body. The security guard checked his watch. A car rolled by and made everything briefly too ordinary. We drifted to the side so we could peer through the gate. The lock was old but sturdy. Beyond it, the path was narrow, the ground uneven, the stones like teeth. The oaks overhead knitted together, and the lantern light from the tour stretched the shadows like rubber. Somewhere, a frog was making a noise that sounded almost like speech. Each person took their turn pressing a phone camera to the bars and snapping a picture. I didn't want to, but Mia insisted. "You need something to look at later when you've convinced yourself it was nothing," she said. The way she said it made it a dare. So I lifted my phone and took one shot, then another at a slightly different angle. On the third shot, my thumb brushed the volume button and the phone made that tiny, greedy click. I don't know why I mention it, except that the sound felt too loud, like it had weight in that place. We thanked Elaine, left a tip in her little pouch, and drifted back toward the sidewalk before the group moved on to their next ghost story. As we walked, the night got thicker. The sky was dark enough that the stars looked like pinpricks. When we reached the old city gates, Mia stopped and looked back at the cemetery. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "Feel what?" Mark said. "The heaviness." She put her hand to her chest. "Like you get on elevators. I did feel it. I'd felt it since we parked. But I didn't want to give it a shape by saying it out loud, so I told her I was just tired and hungry." Mark laughed, relieved that someone had said something normal. We decided to grab food. The city at night is a loop of tourists circling the same lit windows, but you can still find quiet if you turn down the right street. We ended up in a narrow bar with checkered floors and a chalkboard menu. Our waitress had a name tag that said "Live," and she told us the kitchen was closing soon, so we ordered fast. She asked if we were in town for a tour, and Mia said, "Cemetery," and Liv made a face like she was swallowing gum. "I won't go near that place," she said. "I have to pass it on my bike to get home, and I cross the street. My best friend's grandfather is in there, and she says when she visits, she never goes alone. Says she hears her name. Maybe it's just the traffic, you know?" But she let the sentence trail off and moved to another table. We ate. We kept the conversation on surface-level stuff. Halfway through my sandwich, my phone buzzed. I ignored it until we were done, and then while Mia was paying, I pulled it out. 3 new photos, all the ones from the gate. The first 2 were exactly what I remembered. The third looked darker. At first, I thought my finger had smudged the lens, but when I zoomed in, I realized the dark wasn't a smudge at all. It was like a silhouette just inside the fence. Too thin for a person. A bend where a shoulder might be, a slope where a cheek might be, but wrong, stretched. The face, or where a face should be, was paler than the rest, just a shade lighter than the stone behind it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a dozen rational things in the time it took Mia and Mark to come back to the table. I was still telling myself when we stepped out onto the street. That's when I heard it. "Hey," a voice said. "Hey," my name. It came from behind us from the direction of the cemetery. It wasn't loud, more like the way someone says your name when they're trying not to embarrass you in a crowd. I turned, expecting to see someone from the tour. The sidewalk behind us was empty. A couple crossed the street in the distance. A man dragged a trash bag to a curb, but no one close enough to call me like that. "Did you hear?" I started. "Hear what?" Mark asked, already annoyed. "Nothing," I said, because what else was I going to do? Tell them a voice said my name and then hid? We walked faster. The night had gone glossy with dew. The air conditioner units in the alleys rattled like dice in a cup. My phone buzzed again, a random calendar alert I'd forgotten to turn off, and I jumped so hard I laughed out loud to cover it. Mia linked her arm through mine, something she does when she senses me slipping into my head. "It's okay," she said quietly enough that Mark couldn't hear. "We'll go back to the hotel and put on dumb TV and make fun of the ads." It worked. It made the night feel ordinary again. For about 10 minutes. The hotel was one of those places that tries to be old by putting fake antique trunks in the lobby. Our room was on the 2nd floor, down a carpeted hallway that smelled like detergent. We did the ritual we do in every hotel. Shoes off by the door, TV on low, someone digs for snacks in a bag like a raccoon. Mark was scrolling on his phone. Mia was flipping through channels, and I was in the bathroom washing my hands when the lights flickered. They didn't go out. They just dimmed for a second, enough to make you look up. I stared at my reflection. The mirror was one of those big ones with a beveled edge that throws a halo around your head. Something about the way the light hit my face made me look unfamiliar, like a version of me I'd see in a dream where I was supposed to be someone else. "You good?" Mia called from the room. "Yeah," I said, drying my hands. Just thinking about how we paid extra for historic charm and got flickering lights. When I opened the bathroom door, the room felt colder. The AC shouldn't have been able to do that on a September night, but there was a draft like someone had left a window open. I checked. The windows were sealed shut. Mia had finally found a crime show where the killer does something dumb in the first 5 minutes and you spend the rest of the hour yelling at the screen. We settled in to make fun of it. The mood lifted. Then the room phone rang. I didn't know anyone still used room phones. It sat on the nightstand like a prop. We all stared at it. Mark laughed, then checked his cell like maybe he'd accidentally set up a wake-up call we didn't ask for. It rang again. I picked it up because I was closest. "Hello?" I said. There was a half-second of static, the kind that makes you think you're about to hear a call center pitch. Then, in a voice like someone standing outside the door whispering through the crack, I heard, "Hey, my name." I froze. "Who is this?" Static again. Then, "Come back to the gate." I hung up so fast the handset smacked the cradle. I stood there, hand still on the phone, my heartbeat going up like a siren. I was about to say nothing, "Don't worry about it, wrong number," when I saw the way Mia was looking at me. "What did they say?" she asked. I told her the truth. Mark groaned and said it had to be the hotel front desk messing with the ghost tour tourists. "They probably get a kick out of it," he said. I wanted that to be true. I called the front desk. The woman answered on the second ring and said cheerful hotel stuff in a cheerful hotel voice. When I asked if they'd just called our room, she said no, and she sounded genuinely confused, not the performative kind. I thanked her and said it wasn't a problem. It struck me that I didn't want to say the cemetery out loud to her. We turned the TV back on, louder this time. I sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to be fascinated by a commercial for a medicine that apparently solved every problem but would also ruin your liver. My phone was on the nightstand face up. A notification slid across the screen. A new voicemail. Not my cell. The icon was for the room phone. I didn't know room phones had voicemail icons, but there it was. A little glowing envelope, blinking. Mia saw it too. She shook her head. "Don't." Of course I did. I pressed the button and put the handset to my ear. It clicked and whirred like a tape deck. Then I heard the voicemail in my own voice. The voicemail lady, cutting me off with, "You have one new message." A beep. The message was a whisper you get by accident when someone thinks they've hung up. At first it was just air. Then a soft shuffle like feet on dirt. Then my name, in that almost embarrassed tone like we were about to be late for something. "Hey, my name." A long breath. A swallow. And then, so quiet I had to hold the receiver against my head. "You almost said it." "What?" I whispered like an idiot. "You almost said my name." I hung up again. Mark said something defensive, but it didn't stick in my head. Mia took my hand, squeezed it hard. I thought about Elaine's voice telling us not to answer if we heard our names from the other side of the fence. I thought about my grandfather and his keys. Names opened doors. We didn't sleep much. Every noise was a footstep in the hall, every heartbeat a knock. Mark fell asleep around 2, his phone still lit in his hand. Mia and I sat in the bathroom with the light on and the fan running because white noise made it feel like nothing could get in. Around 3, the room phone rang again. We didn't move. It rang until it stopped. I stared at the door. Behind my eyes I could see the gate. I could see the pale shoulder. I told myself I was imagining everything and that the human brain hates silence and fills it with stories. I told myself a lot of things I didn't believe. Eventually, the sun tugged at the curtains and we felt stupid and brave in the way you can only feel at dawn after a bad night. We packed fast. We checked out. The woman at the front desk asked how our stay was. I said fine. I didn't mention the phone. It would have been smart to leave town then. To drive out on A1A with the windows down and forget the whole thing. Instead, Mia said the thing that would get us into trouble. "I want to see it once more." In daylight, we went. Day changed everything and nothing. The cemetery looked smaller, like most scary places do once the sun hits them. The iron gate was dull brown and solid, and there were leaves stuck along the bottom like a skirt. A groundskeeper worked by the far wall, raking quietly. A couple took selfies by the old city gates. The security guard from last night was back, sipping coffee. He nodded to us. I couldn't tell if he recognized us or if he gave that nod to everyone who looked like they didn't know what to do with their hands. We didn't take pictures. That felt important. We stood there and watched the wind move the moss. The air still had that elevator heaviness. I was turning to go when a small boy walked up to the fence. He was with a woman I assumed was his mother. She was distracted, trying to open a water bottle. The boy put both his hands on the bars and leaned in the way kids do, pressing his forehead to the cool metal. "Hello," he said, sing-song. "What's your name?" I moved without thinking. I touched his shoulder. "Hey," I said, stupidly urgent. "Don't." He looked at me like I'd told him Santa was dead. The mother hustled him away and gave me a look that said she was half thankful and half convinced I was a creep. I was okay with that. As they left, the boy glanced back at the gate, and I swear the shadows closest to the bars went still, like a breath had been held and then released. Mia didn't say anything until we were back at the car. "You were right," she said quietly. The heaviness. Mark had gone quiet, too. It made me nervous. He's only quiet when he's leaving a room in his head. We got in the car. The AC did its best. The seatbelt buckle was hot from the sun. We pulled away. We didn't talk much on the drive. St. Augustine fell behind us, then the coastline, then long stretches of highway where the billboards feel like they're trying to convince you that your soul could be better if you just paid monthly. Every half hour or so my phone buzzed. Nothing popped up. No missed calls, no texts. Just a buzz like a phantom limb. We stopped for gas outside Daytona. While Mark filled the tank, I went inside to buy bottled water. The cashier had a radio playing an oldies station. When I set the drinks on the counter, the DJ said my name. Not my full name, the nickname my grandfather used. The one I hadn't heard from anyone in years. He said it like a shout-out. "Happy birthday to..." and my name, like a joke in a room I couldn't see. I must have made a face because the cashier gave me my change and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Weird song." Back in the car, Mia watched my face. "We should say it," she said. "Say what?" "The rule," she said like it was obvious. "You said your grandfather had one about names. I didn't remember telling her that. Maybe I had, last night in the bathroom when we were trying not to cry." I swallowed and said what he always made me say after scary stories, in the same flat rhythm he'd used to make it sound like a recipe. "If you hear your name from behind you," I said, "you don't turn around. If you hear your name from the dark, you keep walking. And if you almost say a name you don't know..." I stopped there because my tongue didn't want to finish it. Saying it felt too much like opening a door. "You don't," Mia finished for me. "You don't say it. We said it like kids." It helped. It made the air in the car feel less crowded. For the rest of the drive, the buzzes spaced out and eventually stopped. We listened to a podcast about a missing person case that felt almost wholesome compared to the night we'd had. We dropped Mia at her apartment, then Mark at his. I drove the last 30 minutes alone. At a red light 3 blocks from my place, my phone dinged with a new message. I knew better than to look. I looked anyway. It was a photo, no sender, just a gray bubble like it had come from the phone itself. The picture was of a gate, not the Huguenot Cemetery. This one was smaller, a backyard gate I recognized because it was mine. The chain latch, the notch where the wood splintered last winter, the thin line of shadow where the fence meets the hedge. The angle was from the alley, like whoever took it had stood there for a long time, waiting for the exact moment my fence would look most like a mouth. I put the car in park. I closed my eyes. I breathed the way the internet tells you to when you're panicking. Then I opened my eyes and drove home because where else was I going to go? My backyard gate was closed. The alley behind it was empty. I stood there in the daylight and tried to hear something. A name, a breath. The kind of whisper you can convince yourself is breeze. Nothing came. Inside, I threw my phone in a drawer like a toddler, then immediately took it back out because I couldn't stand not knowing. There were no new pictures in my gallery, no new messages, nothing to show anyone, even if I'd been brave enough to try. I slept that night with a chair under the doorknob like I used to when my ex moved out and the apartment felt like a map of places I'd been happy. I dreamed of a fence that wasn't a fence, of bars that were fingers, of a pale shoulder just out of frame. In the dream, I could hear my name over and over, called in that same almost embarrassed tone, like a friend who doesn't want to make a scene. I woke up with my mouth dry and my hands clenched and a single idea sitting in my head like an egg in a nest. You almost said it. The day wore on. Work was emails and coffee and pretending to laugh at jokes you've heard before. Every so often, someone in the office would say my name and I'd flinch because for a second it sounded like the voice from the phone. I Googled the cemetery. I told myself I was just curious. I found the same facts Elaine had given us, the same handful of stories, the same warnings not to trespass. In one grainy forum post from years ago, a user swore that if you stand at the gate at midnight and speak the name that comes into your head, the pale man will step closer. They didn't say what happened next. The post had no replies. I didn't go back. I want to make that clear. I didn't go back to St. Augustine. Not then, not yet. But 2 nights ago, at 2:13 a.m., my bedroom filled with that soft elevator heaviness, and I woke up certain someone was standing just outside my door. My phone lit up with no notification. From the hallway, in that same low voice, I heard, "Hey." I didn't answer. I didn't get out of bed. I breathed slowly until the heaviness eased. When I finally got up and checked, the hallway was empty. The front door was locked. The chair under the knob was still in place, stupid and brave. This morning, Mia texted me a photo she took at brunch. It was a shot of her mimosa because she thinks it's funny to pretend she's a person who takes pictures of her food. In the reflection of the glass, small and warped and pale as if someone had scraped my face out of the picture with a fingernail, you can see the suggestion of a man standing behind her shoulder. Thin. A slope where a cheek might be. The curve of a shoulder that doesn't match the angle of any human body. He's not in any other photo from that table. He's not in the waitstaff's memory, according to the text she sent right after, because of course she asked them. The reflection only showed up in that one shot. The one she sent me with the caption, "Do you see him?" I didn't reply. I'm writing this down because I need to put it somewhere that isn't just my head, somewhere that will exist if I wake up tomorrow and convince myself we were overtired and suggestible and primed by a tour guide with a lantern voice. I'm writing it down because names open doors, and I keep almost saying his. I won't write it here, even if I knew it. I won't say it, even in my head. I won't go back to the gate at midnight with the idea in my mouth like a coin, but if you find yourself in St. Augustine on a warm night, with the moss like wet hair and the iron cold under your hands, don't answer when you hear your name from the other side. Don't turn when you feel the breath on your neck. And if a voice, quiet, almost embarrassed like he doesn't want to make a scene, asks you to say his name, don't. Not even a whisper. Not even a syllable. Because once you say it, the door opens. And after that, I don't think it ever fully closes again. I keep hearing mine. In the stairwell of my building. From the hedges by my backyard. From the phone when it isn't ringing. Soft, patient, almost kind, like he's got all the time in the world. I haven't answered yet. I don't know how long I can keep not answering. I never planned to spend the night inside Key West Cemetery. I wasn't chasing a dare or trying to make a video. I was just covering a shift no one wanted. I was 27, broke, and working the kind of odd jobs you forget to put on a resume. A bartender at the place I worked, Mallory's on Angela, told me her cousin needed an extra set of eyes at the cemetery during Fantasy Fest weekend. Too many people slipping in after dark, drinking, breaking headstones. It's easy, she promised. Walk the paths, call me if anyone's doing something dumb, and lock the front gate at midnight. You'll be done by 2. I said yes before I thought about it. That afternoon, I met the grounds supervisor, a guy named Luis. He was in his 50s, with a sun-cooked face and a calm way of not blinking for a long time. He handed me a ring of keys big enough to anchor a boat. Don't worry, he said, like he had to say it. Most nights it's just iguanas. There were 2 other people on with me. My friend Danny, who was good at telling me when I was about to do something stupid, and a seasonal hire named Nico who kept saying the heat didn't bother him. It did. It clawed at the back of your throat. Even at midnight, Key West felt like a damp towel wrapped around your face. My job was to start at the Margaret Street gate and walk a loop to the Francis entrance, check the mausoleums along the way, and make sure no one had climbed in through the back wall. It wasn't a big place, not compared to some northern cemeteries. But the layout was messy. Above-ground vaults jammed next to family plots, palm trees leaning like they were listening to you pass, plaques set into coral rock. The famous headstone, "I told you I was sick," was on our map as if it were a tourist attraction. People left bottle caps and loose change at its base. I've always liked that kind of dark humor, even when I pretend I don't. Luis walked with me once before he left for the night. He had a way of pointing without pointing, like he didn't want to gesture too obviously at any one tomb. He told me 3 rules in that steady, quiet voice. First, don't step over the vaults. Walk around. Nothing wants to be stepped on. Second, if you hear someone behind you and it sounds like a third step that isn't yours, don't turn around. That's a trick the old ones like to play. And third, don't lock the Francis Gate until the clocks chime midnight on Fleming. Folks get confused in here, and sometimes they're late leaving. He patted the keys in my hand like he was returning a sleeping child. We keep good relationships, he said. With the neighbors. And with the neighbors. He meant the dead. Danny met me by the Margaret Gate with 2 water bottles and a flashlight the size of a baton. "This is the dumbest easy money I ever agreed to," she said cheerfully. "Give me the fun path." We split the cemetery like a pie. Nico took the western edge where the densest vaults made tight aisles. Danny had the middle. I took the path that looped past the older Catholic section, where the marble was softer and the engravings feathered away like breath on glass. For the first hour, everything was normal, or normal for a cemetery at night. The iguanas were a bigger problem than anything else. Giant, prehistoric-looking lizards that would drop out of trees with a thud. A black cat threaded itself in and out of the wrought iron fences like it owned the place. The lights from Francis Street made the tombs look like they had edges cut in shadow, and the breeze smelled like salt and frangipani. Every now and then, a tourist would come up the fence and press their face to the bars. "Yo, is it haunted?" Someone yelled from the sidewalk. I pretended not to hear. Most people did that to get a reaction. At 11:35, I passed the famous headstone. "I told you I was sick." Someone had balanced a plastic lime wedge on the top. Next to it was a half-smoked cigar and 3 coins. It looked almost conversational, like if you stood there long enough you'd hear a punchline. I kept walking. I took pictures of 2 vaults where the climate had shifted the lids. I texted Danny. "You good?" She sent back a photo of a rooster standing on a cross. Holy bird. I was laughing when I heard the footsteps, not the scuff of a tourist, not the rustle of an iguana. These were soft and dry like a hand patting sand. They matched my pace. I stopped. So did the sound. I started again. So did it. I remembered Luis's rule. If you hear a third step, don't turn around. At first it was funny, the kind of thing you tell yourself is funny so it won't feel like a threat. I pictured Nico sneaking behind me, trying to be clever. I pictured a kid with a GoPro hoping I'd spin around and do something dumb. I imagined anything that needed a living body to make that sound. I passed a row of low vaults that looked like white ovens and a tree that dropped long seed pods that clacked against the path. The footsteps kept 3 beats with mine. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The air cooled by a degree, like I had stepped out of the kitchen and into a back hall. I was suddenly aware that my mouth was dry and my shirt stuck to my spine. I texted Danny again. "Do not mess with me right now." No response. The third step returned when I walked. It paused when I paused. The path curved to the right and I could see the Francis Gate ahead, dark and slatted. Beyond it, under the street lamp, a festival guy in a fluorescent vest smoked and watched his phone. I waved. He didn't look up. "Okay," I said out loud, "because it's weird, but it helps." "I hear you." I didn't turn around. I kept walking. And whatever paced me, those dry, patient steps, kept exactly 3 beats with mine. We crossed a seam of crushed shells where the path had been patched and the sound changed. My shoes ground the shells into powder. The other steps didn't. They padded. That's the word. Like a barefoot person moving heel to toe, careful not to scrape. At the gate, I slipped the key into the lock and looked down at my phone for the time. 11:58. Luis's rule, Nurker 3. Don't lock it before midnight. I stood there with my hand on the key and listened to the tiniest sound of breath that wasn't mine, like a mouth opening to say something and failing. I texted Danny, "Come to Francis." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. "On my way," she wrote. Then, "Where are you exactly?" "I'm by the Cuban plot." "Francis," I typed again, as if that were a spell. I made myself breathe. I looked through the slats at the street, at the guy in the fluorescent vest flicking ash. 2 minutes. 1. Midnight slipped into the air like a fish into dark water. I turned the key and heard the heavy, relieved clunk of the bolt. The footsteps behind me stopped. I told myself that was it. Whatever had followed me wanted me to do my job. It had walked me to the gate like a parent walking a kid to school, making sure they crossed the street. It was ridiculous, but it made me less afraid. I took 1 step toward the center path and heard a different sound, like fingernails tapping the metal behind my head. I looked up in spite of myself. On the inside of the gate, just above my shoulder, 3 tiny smears had appeared on the paint. They looked like salt water dried in place, or like someone had laid damp fingers there for a second, and the heat had ghosted them into view. I reached out and touched the smears. Warm. "Don't touch that," someone said. I turned. Danny stood halfway down the path, her flashlight down at her side. Her face looked too pale. "Don't touch anything that touches you first," she said. It was a line from a ghost tour we'd taken when we first moved to town. She was trying to be funny, but her voice wasn't steady. "Did you hear it?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes sliding past me. "No, but my phone glitched and kept switching to the camera without me pressing it. And I heard—" She stopped. "Never mind. I'm being dumb." We stood there a second, listening. The cemetery has an ocean sound when you're still enough to hear it. Air moving through leaves, tiny legs in grass, refrigerator hum from a house rubbing against the night. Danny said, "Let's do 1 more loop and call it." She kept the flashlight trained low. We walked past the row of family plots whose fences were belly-high and pointy, through the seam of shells, along the older stones leaning like bad teeth. I stopped at the "I told you I was sick" headstone and picked up the plastic lime wedge to set it straighter. "Leave it," Danny said. "I know, but leave it." We left it. The cat reappeared and trotted ahead of us like a guide. A breeze came from nowhere and fixed our sweat to our skin in a tacky sheet. We passed a bench carved with the words, "If love could have saved you." Danny mouthed the rest. "You would have lived forever." My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled it out without thinking, expecting Nico, but it was an unknown local number. No contact photo, just the 305 and a scatter of digits. I answered without taking my eyes off the path. "Yeah?" Silence. "Hello?" What came through sounded like a radio slightly off tune. At first, I thought it was the vest guy at the gate calling to say he'd seen someone hop the wall. Then the static arranged itself into a voice. The words were clear but too soft, like lips speaking against glass. She said very slowly, "Please don't leave me alone in here." I stopped dead. Danny lifted the beam and scanned the dark. "What is it?" I put the phone on speaker. We listened. Only the small rush of air from the speaker. "Who is this?" I asked. "Where are you?" After a second, the voice again. Louder. A young woman, maybe our age. "Please don't leave me alone in here." Danny's eyes sharpened. "Where?" "In here," the voice said. "With them." The call cut out. We stood there, stupid with adrenaline, both of us listening for crying or footsteps. I called back. Straight to voicemail. We started walking faster, and I realized we had drifted toward the western edge where the vault stood shoulder to shoulder. "Nico," Danny called. "You got someone with you?" Silence. Then Nico's flashlight bobbed into view between crypts. He stepped out with that embarrassed grin he wore when he felt outnumbered by a situation. "Yo," he said. "Do you hear singing?" "No," I said immediately, but when I held my breath I heard it. The smallest thread of tune, like someone humming only the parts of a song they remembered. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the air itself. 3 notes, then 3 more, then a pause. It wasn't pretty. It was practical, like a signal. "Where's it coming from?" Danny whispered. She swept her light in an arc over the vaults. The beam caught on a phototile set into one of the stones. A young woman in a white dress looking like it was her only white dress and she chose it for a reason. The photo had that faded blue tint old memorial portraits get. Someone had tucked a seashell into the crack above it and laid a bracelet on the ledge. The hummed tune paused as if it had noticed our noticing. We don't talk about the moment when you make a decision you know you'll regret, because it never feels like that in the instant. It feels like you're being reasonable. It feels like you're doing the humane thing. Danny said, "Hello," and I said, "We got a call." And Nico took 2 steps forward and placed his hand on the vault as if it could feel pressure the way we do. When his fingers touched the stone, the air temperature dropped as fast as opening a walk-in freezer. My breath came out visible. Danny's flashlight went dull at the edges. We heard a soft shift from under the vault like a bag of sand being set down. The humming resumed, closer, as if the notes were forming in the cold air between us and the stone. I pulled my hand back from my phone like it had burned me. "We should get Luis," I said. "Now." "He went home," Nico said. "Remember? Then we should leave and—" "Please don't leave me alone in here," the voice said, not through the phone this time. From the vault, clear as if the speaker were on our side of the stone, lips an inch from the seam. Danny's hand found mine and squeezed so hard the bones clicked. We stood there like kids who had been called out by a teacher who hadn't raised her voice. "We're not," Danny started, then stopped. "Who are you?" There was a tiny sound that might have been wet. A breath hitch. "I'm in here," the voice said. "It's so small. I'm not going to dramatize what happened next. I'm not going to claim the lid lifted or the ground shook. Nothing dramatic happened. The world stayed exactly itself. We did the wrong thing anyway. We stepped back together. The humming faded. The air warmed a degree. Nico muttered, "Nope," under his breath, turned too fast, and his foot slid off the edge of a low stone. He caught himself on the corner of a vault and scraped his palm. He swore, and that was the moment. Something about the sound he made or about the way his blood dotted the white lid that changed the air. I can't explain it better than that. I felt a mood shift, the way a room changes when someone walks in angry. Across from us, a small family plot sat with its rust-red fence and its gate slightly cocked. The latch clicked. We all heard it. The gate opened half an inch on its own. The tiny movement sounded very loud. Danny's flashlight hit it dead on, and we watched a lizard scuttle out from under the fence like the place had pushed it out. The cat that had been following us made a low, ugly sound and bolted. "Okay," Danny said to no one. Okay. She took my sleeve instead of my hand now, and we walked fast without making it look like we were running. "We're all good," she said, still to no one. "We heard you. We're not closing early. We're just going to—" The thing about paths in Key West Cemetery is that they look straighter than they are. If you don't pay attention, they slide a little and you end up exactly where you didn't mean to be. We cut right at the angel with the broken wing and left at the tree with the wind chimes. But when we reached the corner, the Francis Gate wasn't there. The light was wrong. The street hum was farther away. We were deeper in than before, as if the cemetery had nodded while we walked and moved everything a foot to the left. "Did we?" Nico said, but he didn't finish because the humming started again behind us, and this time it wasn't one person. It was 3. 3 different tuneless strands of the same 3-note phrase, offset enough to sound out of step. The fact of it was worse than the sound. It felt like being approached by strangers at night in a place without exits. Not an attack, not a greeting. An intention we didn't run. We should have, or maybe we shouldn't have. I don't know. We moved like we were late to a bus. The humming followed, and beneath it came the sand-soft footsteps ticking against our own. 1, 2, 3, Danny said. "Don't look back," to herself more than to us. We passed the funny headstone without seeing it. We crossed the patch of shells, and the sound behind us changed to padding, and I told myself that meant we were getting closer to the Margaret Gate. I told myself that like a chant, closer, closer, closer. My throat tasted like a battery. The air stirred, and I smelled something that didn't belong in a cemetery or anywhere near one. Damp, close, like tidewater trapped in a bucket. We turned a corner and almost ran into the mausoleum with the blue glass door. The glass held our reflections like we were standing at the bottom of a pool. For a second, the three of us looked too small in the blue, like children. Behind our shapes, in the watery reflection, something taller moved with us but wasn't us. It stood too close to the surface on the far side, as if we were the ones inside. Nico jerked his head away. Danny pulled me past it. The humming swelled. One voice high, one low, one almost a laugh. The sand steps became a crowd. I could feel how many of them there were, not as numbers but as a pressure behind our backs, like hands hovering inches from touching you while you try to act normal. We turned right at a palm, left at a cross, right at a bench, and there, finally, was the Margaret Gate. Black iron, simple lock, street lamp pooling light on the sidewalk beyond like a blessing. The guy in the fluorescent vest from Francis was nowhere in sight. The street was empty. I put the key into the lock and my hand wouldn't move. It wasn't that the key stuck. It was that my wrist felt pinned in place by a cold pressure. Not a hand, because I've had hands hold my wrist and this wasn't that. This felt like a job being done to me by something that didn't care how I felt about it. I couldn't pull away or push forward. The humming fell into a rhythm, 3 slow notes and a little pause. Danny said my name, like asking and telling me at once. She put her hand over mine. Her palm was warm. For a second, the pressure eased. I turned the key. Something spoke into the seam of the gate right next to my cheek, not with a voice, but with air, and the words formed as the air passed. They were ordinary words in the kind of tone a cashier uses to say something everybody knows. Don't run. Look forward. Walk like you belong. We didn't ask questions. We opened the gate and stepped through and didn't let it slam. The streetlight cut our shadows into thin strips. You know that feeling when you've almost tripped and you get that hot rush in your stomach? I had that exactly until the second the gate clicked shut. Then it stopped. The pressure behind us vanished like it had never been there. The humming snapped off mid-note. We stood with our backs to the fence. No cars came by. The world felt weirdly flat, like sound had been pressed out of it. "Okay," Danny said after a while. "I'm going to say this so it's real, and then I'm going to not say it again. We didn't help whoever that was." "I know," I said. "We couldn't," she said, "which is different from we didn't." Nico held up his scraped hand. The blood looked almost black in the yellow light. "I'm done," he said. "They can fire me or whatever. I'm done." We walked to the bar on Angela without discussing it. Mallory poured us water without asking. She took one look at our faces and slid a stack of napkins across the bar like she was handing us something to hide behind. When I told her about the call, she said, "That happens," in the voice of someone announcing rain. "The cemetery gets your number when you work there. People think it's the tours, but it's not." "Who was it?" Danny said. She didn't mean the person on the phone. She meant the voice at the vault. Mallory thought for a second. "A lot of folks in there," she said. "Some buried too quick. Some buried wrong. Some not buried at all, if we're honest." She wiped a spot on the bar that wasn't wet. "My grandmother used to say there's 2 kinds of people in the cemetery at night. The ones who want you to stay and the ones who want you to leave. The ones who want you to stay, they're the stronger ones." "Great," Nico said, and ordered a double. I went home before sunrise. I slept like my body had been borrowed by somebody else and returned used. In the afternoon, when the heat hit its meanest, I woke up to a voicemail. I'm not going to pretend I thought it was the credit card company and not what it was. I knew the same way you know a door is being watched from the other side. I played it. Static. Then, faint and careful, a woman. "Please, don't leave me alone in here." I deleted it. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Unknown 305. I answered and hung up without listening. It called again and again. The third time, I let it go to voicemail. The same 3 notes hummed in the background of the message, like someone trying to remember a lullaby and failing. I didn't go back to the cemetery. I told Luis I was sick, and he said very politely, "All right," like he didn't believe me, and it didn't matter either way. Nico quit the same day. Danny said she'd do day shifts only, and then she didn't text me for a week, which is how I knew she was trying to reset her brain. A month went by. Fantasy Fest was over, but the tourists never really stop. I tried to forget the sound of bare feet on crushed shell. I tried to forget that blue glass reflection. I avoided Francis Street after dark. I stopped walking past the cemetery at all. You can probably guess I didn't hold the line. That's not how this stuff works. It started small. I'd cut through a grocery aisle and feel someone fall into step behind me, matching my pace. I'd stop and pretend to check the cereal, and the step would stop too, and I'd have to smile at nothing so the woman with the cart wouldn't see my face. I'd be in bed with the fan on high and feel breath push across my ear like words were being shaped but not spoken. It never felt like a person standing over me. It felt like a place pretending to breathe. Then, one night, I woke because my phone lighted my room. Unknown 305. I didn't answer. When it vibrated twice more, I turned it face down. It kept lighting anyway. I'm not proud of this, but I pulled the plug and shut it off and slid it under my bed like a talisman. That's when I heard the sound from the hallway, not footsteps, not humming. A clink, small and precise, like two shells gently tapping. I don't own seashells. I have a ticket stub from a bad movie and a dented beer cap under my couch. I do not have shells in my apartment. I lay there and counted the taps. 3, pause. 3, pause. 3, pause. When I got up and opened my door, my hallway smelled like old Tide water. The taps stopped. I thought about calling Danny, and then I thought about what I would say, and I didn't. In the morning, when the light made me braver, I found 3 wet spots on the wall by my door. Not dripping, just darker patches as if someone had pressed damp fingers there and held them until the paint remembered. I moved a month later. People move all the time in Key West. It's expensive and it's small and you're always borrowing a truck from someone who's already borrowed it from someone else. I moved up Simonton, away from the cemetery. I didn't tell anyone that was the reason. But when Danny helped me carry boxes, she made a joke like, "Farther from our neighbors," and flicked her eyes toward the direction of the cemetery the way a person looks at a wave to see if it's going to reach them. The calls followed. Different numbers, always local. If I answered, the line would crackle like wind. Sometimes I heard those 3 notes. Sometimes I heard breathing. Twice, exactly twice, I heard a voice say, "Don't lock the gate." And the second time I realized it wasn't telling me not to lock the cemetery gate. It was telling me not to lock something else, a different gate I hadn't found yet. I don't have a moral for this. I didn't find the grave of the woman who called. I didn't free anyone. I didn't end anything. I didn't even go back to leave a coin or a lime wedge or an apology. Every time I thought about it, I pictured opening the gate and walking in and hearing the quick, happy shuffle of bare feet on shell. And I stayed away. I still walk at night sometimes because this place makes you. Key West feels borrowed after midnight, like the day gave you permission to use it a few hours and expects it back before dawn. When I take White Street down to the water, I keep to the middle of the sidewalk and I don't cut through alleys even when they seem shorter. I don't step over low fences if I can help it. I try not to walk between anything that looks like it wants to be too. I don't hum. And when I tell this story, people ask what I think it was. A ghost? A trick of the heat? A con that started with a prank call? I could tell you any of those and be halfway right. This is the truest way I can say it. The living call this place paradise. The dead call it something else. Not hell, not heaven. More like a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone and no one forgets anything. You can walk through, and they'll walk with you. You can leave, and sometimes they'll follow a few steps to see you off. If they like you, or if they don't, they'll hum to keep you on the path they prefer. Sometimes I think about that voice at the vault, the careful way she made the words to fit our ears. Please don't leave me alone in here. It's such a human ask. It almost worked. On nights when the air is thick and the island smells like salt and old flowers, I'll be sitting on my steps and I'll hear it. The third step, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, coming up behind me and stopping when I do. It never speaks out loud. It doesn't have to. The rule was simple. Don't turn around. I keep my eyes forward. I walk like I belong. I listen for the clock on Fleming to chime midnight, and I don't lock anything before it. even the small gates you can't see. That's how I live now. It's not brave. It's not wise. It's attentive. And if I pass the cemetery in daylight, with tourists taking selfies by the funny headstone and a tour guide fanning herself with a brochure, I look away before I can see the 3 wet smears on the inside of the gate. I know they'll be there. I know they'll be warm if I touch them. I told Luis once, after I'd had just enough to say it to his face, that he should stop sending people in there at night. He shrugged like the tide. "You did fine," he said. "You followed the rules. What happens if you don't?" He gave me the kind of look you only get from men who have decided a long time ago not to be surprised by anything. "Then nobody walks you out," he said, "and you don't notice when the gate swings the wrong way." He wasn't scaring me for fun. He was telling me something kind and practical, the same way the air had spoken into my cheek at the iron bars. Don't run. Look forward. Walk like you belong. If you ever find yourself there after dark, don't. But if you do, don't step over the vaults. Don't lock early. Leave the lime wedge where someone left it. When you hear the 3rd step, don't turn around. And if you hear the humming and a voice that sounds almost like yours asks you to stay, remember there are 2 kinds of neighbors in there, and the ones who want you to stay are the stronger ones. The living say Key West is paradise. The dead disagree. They're not angry about it. They're patient. They have all the time in the world and a way of making you take the long way out, a way of walking behind you without ever touching you at all, until the sound of your footsteps stops, and something else stops exactly behind them. Then you'll know you're close to the gate, whichever one it is, and you'll have a choice about which way you want it to swing. I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for haunted places. If anything, haunted places tend to find me, or at least that's how it's felt since last August. This happened in Tallahassee, at Old City Cemetery, the one tucked behind the university where the oaks choke the sky and the moss hangs like old lace. You can look up the dates and names if you want. It's a real place with a sign out front and daytime tours. Locals keep one rule about it and they say it plain. If you hear children laughing after midnight, you leave. You don't answer. You don't look. You just leave. We were 3, me, my cousin Danny, and my coworker Jay. It was late summer, heat pressed down even at midnight, the kind of air that sticks to your teeth. We'd closed up the cafe around 11, wiped down the espresso machine, counted the drawer, and found ourselves standing on the sidewalk with that restless energy you get from working on your feet for 8 hours. Jay was the one who said, "Let's do something dumb." I don't feel like sleeping yet. Danny rolled her eyes the way she does when she's already decided to say yes. I should have been the adult and gone home. I didn't. Old City Cemetery was a 10-minute drive. We parked on the far side where the brick wall dips low and the sidewalk buckles from tree roots. A cicada whirred like a cheap fan. Somewhere a freight train sounded its horn and folded into the night. Jay swung his backpack on like we were sneaking into a concert, not a graveyard. He had a little handheld recorder he used for band practice and a flashlight with a cracked lens. Danny wore her hair in a high puff and kept adjusting the strap of the crossbody bag she never goes anywhere without. I had nothing except my phone and a bad idea of what bravery looks like. We didn't climb the wall. We went to the iron gate because Danny said, "If we're doing this, we're not going to be disrespectful." The gate was closed. The sign with the rules was plain. Hours, no littering, pets on leashes, no entry after dusk. Someone had tucked a grocery store bouquet into the bars. The flowers had turned gray at the edges. Rain-damaged carnations always make me think of someone who missed the timing by a day. We stood there, 3 idiots reading the same sign like it would change if we stared long enough. Jay clicked on his recorder. "It is currently 12:07 a.m., he said in a mock deep voice. "We are definitely not going to trespass in a cemetery. We are simply going to stand here like law-abiding citizens and listen for the screams of the damned." "No screams," Danny said. "We are not asking for screams," he grinned. "Right, children's laughter. Totally better. I don't know what did it. Curiosity, boredom. The way the oaks made a tunnel and the light looked like water in the branches. But we drifted along the perimeter, parallel to the brick path inside, separated by the wall. You can see plenty from the sidewalk, the sagging white markers, the lampposts that throw yellow puddles on the ground, the pavilion that looks like a bus stop if you squint. On certain graves, people leave toys. I always think that's both sweet and cruel. Sweet because someone remembered. Cruel because the toy will sit there through rain and sun and never be played with. Danny started reading names out loud in a quiet voice, making a little history for each one, the way she does when we're stuck in traffic and she narrates the lives of the drivers we pass. Mary J., who hated thunderstorms and made the best biscuits in Leon County. Ezekiel R., cobbler, loved dogs, couldn't whistle. It sounds silly, but it kept us soft. Jay, for once, wasn't interrupting. We circled to the MLK Jr. Boulevard side. There's a break in the wall there, a low dip where roots have shoved the bricks apart. Someone had tried to fix it and given up, or maybe the city decided the wall and the tree were going to wrestle forever and let them. Jay set the recorder on the top brick and crouched, listening. Cars hissed by. The moss made slow, dry sounds against itself. Danny's breathing was as steady as a metronome. Then, like a bubble popping right beside my ear, a laugh. High 100% kid, not staged. If you've ever heard a toddler try to keep quiet and fail, that's what it was. A sound squeezed around a smile. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It came from inside the cemetery, close enough that if the wall weren't there, I could have reached out without moving my feet. Jay's eyes flicked to mine. Danny's hand found my wrist, nails just barely touching skin. Did you... She started and stopped herself. The laugh came again, from a different direction, and then a different one after that, overlapping like three kids in a backseat sharing a secret. I felt the small hairs on my arms wake up. Jay whispered, "We're on the sidewalk. We're not breaking any. We're technically okay." Danny shook her head. "We go," she said. She said it in the tone you use when there's no arguing, the voice my aunt used when she told us not to run by the pool. Sometimes rules are just a shape that keeps you alive. We turned as a group, like we'd practiced it. That's when a second sound shuffled into place, the scrape of a broom moving grit across concrete. Not dramatic, a maintenance sound. It came from deeper inside, close to the pavilion. I felt something like relief. The kids could be anyone, drunk undergrads, late dog walkers. A broom meant a person. A man stepped into view between two markers wearing a faded city work shirt and a cap with a reflective stripe. He was older, or he carried himself old. His shoulders rode high under the fabric like tight knots. He rested his hand on the broom as if it were more cane than tool. He didn't startle to see us. He just looked at us the way people look at raccoons near a dumpster, calculating the odds of trouble. "Park closes at dusk," he said, not loud enough to carry, just enough for us to hear. The voice was low and tired, the kind of voice built out of 1,000 repeated warnings. "We know," Danny said, honest, like confession might make grace. "We'll go," he nodded. His gaze passed over each of us and paused on Jay's recorder on the brick. "You don't need that," he said. Jay scooped it up. "No, sir. You hear children, you don't answer," the man said. "You don't count with them. You don't say your name. You don't go looking." His tone didn't change. It was instruction, not superstition. Danny didn't ask questions. I didn't either. But Jay, because he is Jay, said, "Do you hear it a lot?" The man's mouth tightened. He tapped the broom once, the bristles making a brushy click. "Some nights they play," he said, and some small part of me hated that verb. Play sounds safe. Sometimes they follow folks home. I tell people the same thing and they do as they please. He shifted the broom to his other hand. "Now go on. Don't say goodnight. Just go." We went. We didn't run, but we didn't stroll. The laughter didn't chase us. It drifted, the way a song drifts down a hallway. At the car, I checked the back seat because I'm the kind of person who always checks the back seat. Empty. Takes 2 seconds to be sure, and I took 5. We got in. We buckled up. Before I turned the key, I saw the fog. Not on the windshield, on the back window. 3 low shapes pressed against the glass from the outside. ovals with little finger streaks beneath, like 3 small faces had leaned there and slid. It could have been condensation and pollen and my imagination. It could have been anything. I drove away anyway. Back at my apartment, the night thinned like it does on workdays. Somewhere people were baking bread and filling trucks, and buses coughed awake. Danny crashed on my couch with a blanket she keeps in her car for picnics that never happen. Jay sent a voice note he thought was funny. We survived. No ghost daycare in the Corolla. I muted him and pretended to sleep. Around 3:40 a.m., laughter slipped into the room. Not from the street, not from upstairs. It came from the dark between the coffee table and my knees, immediate. It wasn't cruel. That might have been easier. It was the kind of giggle kids make when they know they're breaking bedtime. Something flicked my ankle like a cattail. Danny made a tiny sound and pulled the blanket up over her head. I lay there like a piece of furniture and counted breath in, breath out. I didn't say a number. I didn't say my name. In the morning, we gave ourselves the gift of rational explanations. We ate cereal, scrolled mindlessly, and said things like humidity and acoustics and TikTok kids. Jay texted a clip from his recorder. 10 minutes of boring night sounds followed by a noise that might have been a laugh or might have been a squeak. He added a ghost emoji and the words, "We should go back with better mics." Danny left him on red. 2 days passed. Work was work. I steamed milk and burned my tongue and pretended nowhere had moss. At night, I heard the apartment settle and told myself old wood talks. On the 3rd night, my phone lit up on the counter with a text from an unknown number. Come back. I stared at it too long and then typed, "Who is this?" The read receipt popped up almost immediately. The typing bubble came and went 3 times before the second text appeared. We forgot to say thank you. I put my phone face down and turned the sink on as if I were going to wash dishes. The water ran into an empty basin. The thin sound made me think of the broom. I turned the tap off. In the silence that followed, a small voice very close to my left knee said, "Marco." It was sing-song, not threatening, like a child in a pool. I didn't answer. After 5 breaths, another voice said, "Polo," in a whisper that didn't sound like mine and didn't sound like Danny's either, and still somehow knew the shape of my mouth to borrow. I stood there and did nothing until the refrigerator kicked on and gave me something normal to hold. The next afternoon, Danny called from her car, the sound of her blinker ticking. "I did something you're not going to like," she said. "Please don't let it be a seance." She laughed once without humor. "I went to see my grandma's friend. You remember Miss Rosa? The one who knows everybody who's died in this town and 3 counties around it." I remembered. Miss Rosa had cooked for half the church and buried half her friends. She had a way of saying your name that made you sit straighter. What did she say? She said the cemetery's always been busy, Danny said. Not like TV haunted, just layered. She said kids used to play on the path when their parents came to visit graves in the 1920s, and some of those kids got used to the place the way cats get used to a porch. She said if you hear them, you leave, because if you answer, they bring you into their game. And games don't end on time out there. She said never count with them, never tell them where you live, and never say goodbye. That's a lot of nevers. She said some rules exist because someone broke them once and survived long enough to tell the next person how not to bleed. I didn't ask why. She said never say goodbye. I didn't want to think about what a good night can invite. Jay, of course, thought this was all folklore you could dangle like a keychain. He worked a double and then texted us. "I'm heading there for an audio test." "I'll be smart, relax," Danny called him. He didn't pick up. She sent 3 texts with the word, "don't." He sent back a selfie from the sidewalk. Cap backward, recorder in his hand, mouth twisted into a heroic grin. Behind him, the pavilion looked like a mouth with a thin lip. The oaks held the sky in their hands. 30 minutes later, he sent a voice note. I don't know if he meant to send it or if his phone decided for him. It started with breath, then shoes on grit, then his whisper, "Okay, so there are definitely kids in there. Somebody's messing with me. I'm not going in. I'm not. I'm just gonna..." A laugh interrupts him, close and delighted, and he reacted automatically. "Hey, he said friendly, the way you speak to a dog before you know if it bites. "What's up?" The note ended there. We called. Straight to voicemail. Danny drove toward the cemetery, and I followed 10 minutes behind because I had a blocked-in car and a set of keys that never hide where they're supposed to. I took the cut through the neighborhood, every street named after a tree. All of them darker than any street with that many porches has a right to be. When I reached the wall, the sidewalk was empty. Jay's car was half a block away with the dash light still faintly on like a bad idea. I parked behind him. Danny stood by the low bricks with her hands tucked under her arms. "He's in there," she said without turning. "I know he is." "We don't go in," I said, miserable at how obvious the rule was and how hard it felt to keep. She nodded. "We call someone." We dialed the non-emergency number and did the awkward explanation. Friend missing, last seen near the cemetery, maybe he went for a walk. We're worried. The dispatcher said someone would drive by. We thanked her. We stood in the dark and listened to our own breath sound like other people's. A minute stretched long. A pair of headlights washed the wall and kept going. The air tasted like wet pennies. Then, from inside, the broom. Shh. Shh. Not hurried. Not showy. Just cleaning. The man stepped into the yellow puddle of light and looked older than before, a wrinkle of exhaustion on the night. He wore the same style of shirt. He didn't carry the same weight. "You again," he said. "Not unkind, not kind either. You brought him, but he went without you." "We told him not to go," Danny said. It came out sharper than she meant. She softened it. "Sir, can you walk him out, please?" The man looked past us toward the street, like he was checking for cars that didn't belong to the neighborhood. "You don't go in," he said. He tapped the broom on the path once. "I'll go look." He disappeared behind the oak like the dark had a door. We waited. The laughter came again, mostly to our right, then ahead, then to the left, like someone was circling the block. Twice it sounded like Jay's voice swearing quietly, answering a call I couldn't hear. I wanted to shout his name. I wanted to break the rule so badly it hurt my teeth. Danny touched my elbow. The pressure meant don't. A shape moved between stones. Not the man, bigger steps, arms too long, or maybe that's just my memory stretching things to match what fear deserves. The shape paused, the moss behind it lifting as if in a wind that wasn't there. It cocked something like a head. Then the broom sound again, steady, and the man reappeared, one hand resting lightly in front of him as if guiding someone small. "Walk," he said into the dark as if to a shy child. "We're walking. No talking, no answering, no looking." He came to the break in the wall and gestured at us to step back. We did. He said, "Foot here," and left a tiny space where the brick makes a lip. For a second, nothing moved, and then something pressed down where his hand had indicated. The impression of weight without a foot. The moss bent. The brick creaked. The air made a soft sound like a shoe lifting. Danny swallowed. She whispered, "Jay?" "Don't," the man said. We didn't. The air stepped again, and the man stepped back like he was allowing a line of school kids to pass. One more soft wait, one more slight lean of the night, and then, I swear this is what it felt like. Two small bodies brushed past my shins as if they were squeezing by in a tight hallway. I didn't look down. I looked at the streetlight 3 houses away and counted my breath like a prayer. The man exhaled. "Okay," he said to the space beside him. "You go now." He tapped the broom twice, then looked at us. "He's not with them anymore," he said. "If he knows where he parked, you'll find him." We found Jay sitting on the curb by his car, elbows on knees, staring at a spot in the asphalt about 6 inches in front of his shoes. He looked up like he was waking from a micro-nap. "Hey," he said as if we'd just pulled up to a tailgate. "I think my recorder fell. Did I drop it by your feet?" Danny said nothing. She walked him to the passenger seat and closed the door like she was tucking a kid into bed. I got in and drove. Jay watched the dash clock the way people watch a microwave countdown. After a block, he asked in a voice small enough to fit in a pocket, "Did I say my name?" "No," I said, because that was the truth that mattered right then. He didn't remember how he'd gotten past the wall. He didn't remember answering anyone. He didn't remember the man, not really. He had a sense of being told to move and obeying. When we were halfway to his apartment, he said, sudden, "I hate counting," and then laughed like it wasn't a joke. He slept with every light on for a week and took the long way around town to avoid that block. He deleted the voice note and the selfie from his phone without looking. His recorder never turned up. I don't go looking for it. Since then, the city feels different in small ways. Sometimes I catch kids laughing at the park and I listen a beat too long to be sure it's tied to real bodies. Sometimes the AC kicks in at 2 a.m. and the sound stutters just enough to make me think of a giggle. Sometimes I walk past a brick wall at the edge of campus and notice tiny handprints in the pollen and tell myself a parent lifted a child to look over. Sometimes that parent is me in a future I don't want. This is the part where I should give advice, I guess the part YouTube narrators save for the last paragraph so the comments argue about it. I don't have much. I have what the man said, and what Ms. Rosa said, and what my body says in the dark. If you're in Tallahassee and you get curious, go in the day. Read the names. If you bring flowers, bring fresh ones, and take the plastic sleeve with you because nobody likes trash. Touch nothing that doesn't belong to you. Don't move toys. Don't straighten marbles. Don't tuck the ribbon back into the bow. And if you're there at night, if you break a small town rule because you think you are special, and you hear laughing that doesn't belong to anybody, don't be clever. Don't see if you can catch it on your phone. Don't ask whose game it is. Don't count, not even to 3. Don't say your name. Don't say goodbye. Walk to the wall with your eyes on the path. Step where the brick is solid. Let whatever's behind you stay behind you. If someone with a broom tells you to move, move. If a hand you can't see brushes your knee, pretend it was a moth and keep going. If you get home and the apartment is quiet in the loud way, if you hear laughter in the vents, if your window fogs low like a face pressed there and slid, make your world very small for a few days. Keep your words inside your teeth. Let the game get bored of you. Most nights I sleep fine now. On the nights I don't, I lie on my back and count breaths without numbers. In, out, in, out. The moss above the city leans in the wind you don't feel. The oaks hold the sky up out of habit. Cars whisper by the wall where the brick dips low. Somewhere inside the fence a broom keeps time on the path, steady, patient. The sound of someone who has done the right thing for so long it became the only thing he knows how to do. Somewhere, every so often, 3 small voices laugh and wait for the person who will forget the rule, who will answer without thinking, who will play because the night said, please. I want that person not to be you. I want that person forever to stop at the gate, read the sign twice, and go home. I'm not posting this to scare tourists away from Orlando. I'm posting it because I need someone to tell me I didn't hallucinate, that I didn't get played by a bunch of kids with speakers and costumes. If you live here, you know Orlando isn't just theme parks and fireworks. Downtown has its own quiet, stranger side, the parts that feel older than the skyline and older than the people who built it. Greenwood Cemetery sits in that older layer. It's wedged between lakes and neighborhoods where the houses are close and the porches have ceiling fans spinning all day. People jog past it in the mornings, and families park along the brick streets at sunset because the oaks turn the light gold. But once the gates close, the place changes. The air feels heavier, like it's too tired to move. The sound of the highway drops to a faraway hush you feel in your ribs more than you hear with your ears. This happened last summer, the wet kind, when every afternoon boiled over into thunder. My friend Miguel got me a seasonal job through his uncle with the city's parks department. Night watch, he'd said, holding out the orange vest like it was a prize. It's just locking the gate, chasing off ghost hunters, taking names if anyone gets cute. Easy money. You'll spend most nights eating Wawa in the truck. I needed the money, so I took it. The schedule was simple. Arrive before the gates closed, check the fencing and the maintenance sheds, do a patrol around 11, another at 1, and a final one around 3. It wasn't armed security or anything, just 2 guys, radios clipped to our shoulders, a logbook, and keys the size of fish hooks. Our supervisor, Denise, was a no-nonsense woman who always smelled like peppermint gum. She gave us a laminated sheet the first night, rules and emergency contacts. She tapped a line near the bottom like she'd done it 100 times. "Don't go into the Confederate section after midnight," she said. Not a superstition thing. It draws people. Reenactors, high schoolers, idiots. It's a magnet. Let OPD handle it if you see anything. "The Confederate section?" I asked, past the big live oak with the lightning scar. "You'll know it when you feel it." Miguel winked at me like, "See? Easy." But when we walked it before dark, I understood what she meant. There's a change that happens after you slip past that scarred oak. A long, low branch that looks like it was one storm away from snapping. The ground feels different there. I don't know how else to say it. The grass is the same. The stones are the same. But the air presses on your eardrums. You start swallowing like you're about to drive up a mountain. The stones in that section are close together, old and simple. Some of the names have been eaten by mildew and time. Little flags stood in neat triangles. Someone cared enough to keep them straight. Beyond them, the cemetery stretched out to newer sections and a low hill with an angel that looked like it was listening for something. We got used to the rhythm of the job in the first 2 weeks. I brought a paperback and a thermos. Miguel played the same salsa playlist low on his phone, pretending it kept the mosquitoes away. Sometimes we'd watch thunderstorms roll around Lake Davis, the lightning turning the water into a split-second mirror. We had a handful of small incidents. A drunk couple trying to sneak in for you photos, a pair of goth kids who were polite and left when we asked, a fox with a limp that liked to dart between headstones and make me jump. Then came a Wednesday. I remember the exact day because my neighbor's kid had soccer, and I could hear the whistle while I was napping before my shift. The heat broke early, which meant the evening felt heavier, like the air had decided to sit on our shoulders instead of our arms. When I pulled up to the gate, the sky had that orange bruise to it, like the last light was trapped in the humidity. Miguel was leaning against the truck, chewing on a toothpick. "You're late," he said. "It's 7:02, I said. "I'm 2 minutes early." He grinned and handed me a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Got you the turkey." Denise stuck her head in earlier. "Said to watch for pranksters. Some TikTok is telling people Greenwood is active this week." I took a bite, chewed, and tried not to get mustard on the logbook. "Active?" He wiggled his fingers like a horror host. "Ghost marches. Phantom muskets. That kind of thing." We laughed, because that's what you do when you work nights in a place like that. You make jokes to keep the dark from acting like it owns the place. We locked the gates at 8, did the first walk-through while the mosquitoes made their early run, and settled in by the maintenance shed with the light over the door that buzzed like it was full of bees. Somewhere around 10, a breeze came up out of nowhere and turned the Spanish moss into a slow, gray river. We both stood up. Wind like that, with no warning, usually meant a storm cell breaking apart in our direction. The breeze held for 30 seconds. Then it was gone. The moss froze mid-sway like someone pressed pause. The radio hissed like a cat and clicked twice. It took me a second to realize I'd heard it. You know how you can listen to something all night and not really hear it until it does something new? We stared at each other. "Denise?" Miguel said into the shoulder mic. "You on?" Static. Then a pop that sounded like someone tapping metal. A voice came through low, like a memory of a voice. I couldn't pull words out of it, just cadence, short bursts, a rhythm that made my spine tighten without my permission. Click. Click. A third click, distant, like another radio answering it across a field. "Probably another channel," Miguel said, but his tone was too bright. He cranked the volume down and fidgeted with the dial. "Somebody out on a work crew bleeding in. From where?" "Hell if I know. Kissimmee. Winter Park? The moon." We did our 11 o'clock walk with our flashlights low to keep from blinding ourselves. The light from downtown painted a faint orange dome over the trees. Frogs chirped, somewhere near the baby section, a place with too many small stones and small angels. I smelled something like wet powder. It hit me the way a smell sometimes hits you, straight to a memory you didn't know you had. Fireworks, but close, and colder if that makes sense. I looked at Miguel. He made a face. He smelled it too. "Do you ever feel watched?" I said, immediately embarrassed for saying it out loud. "All the time," he said. like it was no big deal. Cameras. Denise is peppermint. I'm serious. So am I. He clipped his flashlight to his vest so he could rub his arms. The breeze returned in a slow, steady loop, lifting and dropping the moss like it was breathing. Don't think about it too much. It's a place full of names. Names want mouths to say them. We ended up at the big oak with the lightning scar. It ran down the trunk in a bright stripe like someone had peeled the bark with a giant knife. Past, it lay the section Denise had told us to leave alone after midnight. I looked at my watch. It was 11:17. Let's swing wide, Miguel said, and we cut left along a row of newer graves. A pair of candles burned in glass cups at the foot of a stone, their little flames making a full ring of light against the dark like they were refusing to be lonely. A raccoon popped his head up and decided we weren't worth the trouble. We finished the loop, signed the logbook, and leaned against the truck, pretending the buzzing light was enough company. Midnight passed. The air thickened in that way only Florida knows, where even your breath feels damp. The radio stayed quiet, which somehow made the earlier static worse in my head. Around 1, God, I remember the watch face glowing one like it was a little accusation, we stood up to do the second patrol. Let's split it, Miguel said. You take around Lake Cherokee side. I'll cut up by the Angel and meet you at the Oak. Save us 10 minutes. We'd done that before. Greenwood isn't a maze if you pay attention. The paths are old carriage roads and the trees are good landmarks. Still, my stomach did a slow turn. Sure, I said. I took the left edge, past the fence that backed up to little houses with blue TV flicker in their windows. A dog barked once and then decided sleep was better. Crickets fiddled. The smell of wet powder came again, stronger this time, riding a breeze that never touched my skin. Ahead, between 2 rows of headstones, a shape moved across the path. It was low and fast, like a person ducking. My chest flipped. I swung the flashlight up and caught a possum giving me the world's most offended look. I laughed too loudly and told it sorry like an idiot. When I reached the hill with the Angel, the air changed. It's hard to describe without sounding dramatic, but the best way I can say it is, you notice you can't hear your own footsteps. You feel them in your legs, but the sound is swallowed. It registered late that the crickets had stopped. The frogs held a single long note. The highway hush cut off like someone had closed a door on it. Miguel's light bobbed across the hill toward me. He lifted his arm to wave and then froze. Not a little freeze. He stopped like he'd been given a word he had to listen to with his whole body. "Hey," I said, too loud. It hurt my ears. He didn't look at me. He was facing down the slope toward the oak with the scar. His mouth was slightly open like he was trying to count but had lost track of the numbers. I started, and then I heard it. I didn't actually hear it at first. I felt it in the ground through my shoes. A hollow pattern, like a tapped drum in another room. Thump, 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 thump. Not quite walking. Not quite a heartbeat. A cadence old enough that your bones remember it even if your brain doesn't. Miguel spoke, but not to me. "Dress it up," he said softly, "like you talk to a kid like you talk in church." His eyes tracked something I couldn't see yet. His hand went to the brim of a hat he wasn't wearing, a line formed out of nothing in the fog low to the ground. Look, I know fog is just water and air. I know your eyes like to connect dots, but it organized. It organized into height and space, into the absence where shoulders should be, into gaps where arms swung. The line came in pairs that didn't overlap, stepping in that same old rhythm, the one I felt first and then heard. They didn't glow. They didn't moan. There were no blue lights, no cheap smoke machine wisps. It was more like the night chose certain places to be denser and certain places to be absent, and those places moved. Something about it told me uniforms without me seeing any cloth. Something about it told me muskets without me seeing any wood or steel. Every flag in that section lifted as if a person had inhaled in front of it. Miguel's breath went out of him like he'd been punched. I took a step back and then another. The radio on my shoulder clicked. "Oi," a voice said, too bright, too near. "Oi." Then it shifted and fell away like a person walking with a microphone past a doorway. I grabbed it. "Denise," I said. "Are you hearing this?" Static, a pop. Then a set of words tumbled through that I would have bet money were not modern. "Hold your dressing," a man said in a low tone, calm and firm like a father telling a kid to watch his step. It wasn't in a spooky accent. It wasn't theatrical. It sounded like an instruction he'd given 1,000 times. The radio clicked again. Somewhere beyond the fence line, a car alarm chirped once and fell silent like it had been embarrassed. One of the flags leaned toward us and stayed there, as if something invisible had brushed it and forgotten to let go. "Back up," I told Miguel, my own voice high and thin to my ears. "Back up, man. Come on." He shook his head, not like no, but like he was clearing water out of his ears. "You hearing roll?" he said, and there was a quiet panic in it. "You hearing roll? What?" "Listen." He pressed 2 fingers against his own neck like he was checking his pulse. "Listen to the names." I did, because you can't not when someone you trust says a sentence like that. Under the hollow beat of the steps, under the low breath of the wind through moss, under the world there were words. Less like voices in the air and more like the shape of sounds already made. You know when you walk into a room right after a song ends and your body can still feel where the chorus was? Like that, but with syllables. Names. Said in a cadence old and formal and tired, as if the mouths who said them once had known each other too well. The line drew nearer. It never glowed. It never solidified into faces. But the difference between open space and not open space reached our shins, then our knees. I tried to count pairs and couldn't keep it straight. The smell of spent powder closed over the hill. My eyes watered. "Back up," I said again, but now I was talking to my own legs. Miguel took a step and his heel landed in a low dip he didn't see. He stumbled and threw his hand out and his palm hit a headstone. He caught himself, breathing hard. His fingers left a print that didn't look wet or dirty. It looked dusty, like he'd palmed the underside of an old desk. The radio clicked twice in the exact slow rhythm the line was walking. Then the voice, closer now as if it had put its mouth to my shoulder mic, "Hold your dressing." We turned and walked. Not ran. Walked like people who knew if they ran they would fall, and if they fell, they would be under something rather than near it. My flashlight beam wobbled and found only the building blocks of night. Trunk, stone, moss, path. Behind us, the cadence carried on. It didn't quicken. It didn't chase. It just continued the way a song continues whether you want it to or not. At the edge of the oak's reach, just as the scarred trunk came up on our left, a third click stuttered in the radio, more distant than the others, more tired. It had a word under it. I heard it and didn't want to say it out loud, and I still don't want to now, but I will, because this is the part that keeps me awake. It was my last name. Not shouted. Not dragged. Said clear and steady the way a roll call says a name it expects to be followed by present. My brain did the stupid thing brains do. It tried to make a joke to save itself. Maybe there was a reenactment group with a list of random names. Maybe a friend of a friend had set this up to mess with me. Maybe there was a convincing Bluetooth speaker tucked into a tree. My hand went for my phone before I realized I didn't remember putting it in my pocket when we left the truck. We crossed the line where, earlier, the crickets had stopped. They started again, abruptly, like a power strip had been flipped back on. The highway hush drifted in, a comfort noise I didn't know I liked until it left. The flags settled. The smell faded. The line dissolved into the regular, featureless kind of dark. Miguel bent over with his hands on his knees and laughed in a way that had nothing to do with humor. I stood there, listening hard for a thing that wasn't there anymore and hearing only the ridiculous sound of my own swallow. "Okay," Miguel said after a while, voice raw. "Okay, we're not calling that in." "We should," I said. "We should call it in." "To say what?" "Hey, Denise, the air walked at us. She'll write us up for stepping into the section after midnight. We'll be those guys. What if someone's actually in there?" I said, but even as I said it, I knew. There hadn't been anyone in there. No one with feet. No one with lungs to make words. We walked back to the truck with stiff legs. The maintenance light buzzed like it had always been doing its job. The logbook lay on the dash. Miguel pulled it to him and wrote the time and no activity. His hand shook. He put the pen down like it weighed more than it should. We sat until 3 without talking much, swallowing cold coffee that tasted like the inside of the thermos. The radio clicked once at 2:12, as if some part of the frequency had stretched and then snapped back. At 3, we did the last walk together. We didn't go near the oak, we cut a wide arc and pretended we had a reason for it. At dawn, when the sky turned that whitish gray that makes the world look like it's waiting for instructions, we opened the gates. Early joggers nodded. A maintenance guy on a bike rang his little bell and coasted in. The spell broke, if spell is the right word. We drove to the office, signed our shift sheets, and didn't put anything in the comments box. I told myself I would never go back on a night like that. But rent is rent. We stuck to the rules even harder. Finish the last patrol by 12:45, no exceptions, and stay clear of the Confederate section after. Denise gave us a look one morning, a sideways thing that said she knew when people were hiding a story. She didn't ask. Here's the part I haven't told anyone. Not even Miguel. 3 days after that, I found a track on the inside of my windshield. It was faint, a diagonal haze sweep, like the kind you'd leave if your hand was dirty and you wiped a circle to see out of a fogged window. I assumed it was me, or pollen, or the film that Florida air leaves on everything that sits still. I sprayed cleaner. It didn't budge. I had to use the corner of my t-shirt and elbow grease. The rag came away with a smudge I couldn't explain, gray and fine. It smelled like old. I don't put stock in signs. I do my taxes. I show up to work on time. I pack a lunch and I rotate my tires. But 2 weeks after the Wednesday, I started hearing that hollow rhythm in places it had no business being. Waiting at the Colonial Light, the SUV's subwoofer 2 lanes over pulsed out a beat that almost matched it. Walking through my apartment complex breezeway at night, my shoes found it without meaning to. In the cereal aisle, I realized I was tapping it on the handle of the cart. Thump, 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 thump. I made myself stop. When I finally cracked and brought it up to Miguel, we were sitting on the truck's tailgate at dusk before a shift, eating empanadas and watching a heat lightning show far off. "Do you ever hear it when we're not here?" I asked. He chewed, swallowed, and nodded. "Sometimes," he said. "Is that bad?" He didn't answer right away. A dragonfly traced a perfect, pointless oval in the air between us. "There's a word," he said finally. "Entrained. Like how 2 metronomes on the same surface sync up if you leave them long enough. Maybe we just got entrained to a rhythm. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe," I said. He didn't look at me. "I changed my route home," he said. "Stupid, adds 5 minutes. But I don't drive down Gore Street at night anymore. The cut by the fence, the way the lights flicker, it's too easy to think you see a line stepping through." I nodded, relief and unease tangling into something hard to swallow. It helps when someone else names the thing. It doesn't make it less true. We finished the summer. The schedule rolled back to regular staff in September, and Denise hugged us both like a mom who pretended not to be one. I picked up a daytime job at a print shop. I tell myself that I like the noise, the clatter, the smell of ink and heat. I tell myself that every place has a sound, and that the one that got into us is no more special than wind through a pine or train a mile away. I haven't been back to Greenwood after dark. A couple of times I've driven past in the afternoon. The gates open like a yawn. The oaks hang their moss like gray hair. Joggers circle the lakes. It looks like any southern cemetery. Quiet, dignified, a place for remembering. People leave flowers, straighten flags, say names. Time does what it does everywhere else. Forward, forward, forward. Still. Last week, around 2 in the morning, I woke up because someone was walking in the apartment above me. It took me a second to realize I was awake and not dreaming it. The footsteps were steady and sure. They moved from left to right, paused, then went back. Thump, 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 thump. My heart spiked. I lay there, counting, telling myself it was my neighbor, a guy who works nights and sometimes does laundry at weird hours. The steps stopped. A quiet settled that had its own weight. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand, though I hadn't set an alarm. The screen lit my ceiling. No call, no text, just the home screen, with the time in big white numbers and my last name under it because I'd never bothered to change the lock screen from the default contact info. The screen dimmed and went dark. The upstairs neighbor flushed the toilet. A car went by outside with a bass line that had nothing to do with old drums. I lay there, eyes open, waiting for a word I didn't want and listening to my own blood. People will say it was reenactors. People will say we got played by a viral stunt and leaned into it because we were bored and wanted something to happen. People will say human brains find patterns and put stories on them because that's what they were built to do, and that seeing a rhythm in fog is just a cheap trick of nerves fried by caffeine and heat. All I know is that the night felt organized, once in a way that nights usually don't. That something old practiced itself where we could see it. That it said my name like it expected me to answer. And that, sometimes, when I stop at the red light at South Street with nobody else around and the whole city holding its breath in the heat, my foot finds itself marking time against the floor mat. I feel dumb the second I notice, and I lock my heel and I turn the radio up to drown it out. The song never quite matches. It skates around it, dodges it, never lands. That helps. If you plan to go to Greenwood at night because you want to see something, I won't tell you not to. You'll go anyway. You'll carry your phone and your courage and you'll laugh at yourself to kill the silence. Just do me a favor. When you hear the air change, when the crickets forget their chorus and the moss breathes, don't step past the oak with the scar after midnight. Names want mouths to say them. Don't let yours be one of the ones they practice. I'm not writing this for attention. I'm putting it here because I need to get it out of me, and because I'm scared of what happens if I let it rot in my head much longer. If anyone from Daytona Beach reads this, you probably know Pinewood Cemetery. Most people drive past it without seeing it. The place is half swallowed by the trees, fenced with old chain links slumped like tired shoulders. Google calls it Pinewood Cemetery, but everyone I grew up with called it Old Pine. It sits a little west of Beach Street, on the quiet side of town where the river breeze feels a touch colder. The ground there is soft even when it hasn't rained, and the headstones lean like drunks trying to remember which direction home is. I'm from Daytona. I moved back last year to help my sister Hannah after her divorce. I work maintenance at a hotel near the Speedway. Odd jobs, batteries and bulbs, and clogged drains. On weekends, when Hannah has the kids, I fish off Dunlawton, or I just drive. The night this started was a Saturday in early November, the kind of night when the air tricks you into thinking summer might actually be over. My friend Luis texted me at 6:41 p.m. "You still into spooky shit?" He knew I used to watch those investigation videos. Not the jump scare channels, the quiet ones, just guys with flashlights asking old rooms to talk. Luis had gotten it into his head to make content. He'd bought a second-hand camera and a cheap shotgun mic off Facebook Marketplace, and he talked a coworker, Cal, into being on-camera talent. They weren't idiots. They were normal guys in their 30s with night jobs and too much caffeine in their blood. I said no at first, but he kept poking. 1 hour, he said. In, out. Maybe we hear a raccoon and pretend it's a ghost. Easy views. We met in the Winn-Dixie parking lot at 9:12 p.m. Luis popped his trunk to show off the gear. Camera, tripod, 2 flashlights, an EMF meter shaped like a toy, extra batteries, and a pack of gas station donuts. Cal was taller than I remembered, with a shaved head and a laugh that bounced around your ribs in a way you either love or hate. I didn't love it. Pinewood? I asked. Yeah, Luis said. It's perfect. It's basically abandoned, Cal grinned. And cursed, he said in a spooky voice. Mock the dead, drop dead. Karma in express mode. I gave him a look. You're not going to do that, right? He shrugged. It's a bit. Then cut the bit, I said. Luis put up his hands. He won't. We respect the place. We just film some B-roll, walk around, talk about local history. We're not idiots. I wish that had been true. We parked on a side road by the chain link and went in through the gap at the bottom, the one every high schooler knows. The ground inside felt like memory foam under my shoes, springy and not right. It smelled like damp leaves and something sweeter, like old flowers left too long in water. The moon was half there, like someone had taken a bite out of it, and the light made the weeds shine with a greasy kind of silver. A few tiny flags fluttered by a grave close to the fence. There were beer cans and a crushed styrofoam cup and a single sock tucked in a thistle like someone had tried to decorate it. I hadn't been inside Pinewood since I was a teenager. Back then it was a dare. Walk to the back. Touch the big oak. Whisper your name through your fingers and you'd hear it whispered back. We did it once. The whisper I heard was just my own breath, but I still ran until I tasted metal. Being here again made my throat tighten in the same dumb way. Luis set up the camera on the tripod and did a quick intro. He liked saying our names for the parasocial thing. Like that was a magic door to click through rates. "This is Marco," he said, pointing at me, local legend and reluctant guide, "and this is Cal, who's going to pretend to be brave." Cal flexed. "I'm here to kick ghost ass and chew bubblegum," he said. "And as it so happens, I've got gum." "Don't be that guy," I said. We used our phone lights at first, then switched to the big flashlights. The beams made little tunnels in the air where bugs drifted like slow snow. We walked between stones that had half sunken into the ground at dumb angles. Some were so low they looked like teeth sticking out of gums. There were homemade markers, cement poured into a rectangle with a name scratched in before it set, letters crude and honest. We passed one that said, "Little Jimmy, 1942, another that said only "Baby," and a last name I won't write here. I kept thinking about the curse. Everyone in my neighborhood grew up hearing some version of it. If you laugh at the dead here, you'll fall sick. If you scratch on the stones, something will scratch on your windows. Supposedly, Pinewood had been neglected for decades. The city cut the weeds twice a year when someone called enough times to become a problem, but mostly the place was left to get swallowed. People said storms flooded it and bones came up. I didn't know if that part was true, but there were sunken spots that felt like you could step wrong and vanish to your waist. We reached a patch in the center where the ground was more open, a low ring of stones around a darker center like a burned-out campfire. Luis said the map called this the old section. He asked me to talk about the history. I said what I knew. Early 20th century burials mixed with some earlier ones that got moved when other graveyards got developed. I mentioned a rumor that a few of the markers didn't match what was under them. The words felt like I was saying them on someone else's breath. We walked more. We found the big oak at the back, its trunk twisted like rope. A chain hung from one of its branches, no sign of what it had ever carried. Cal reached up and flicked the chain so it clinked. "Don't," I said. He rolled his eyes. "Come on, man. It's just a chain." Luis was framing a shot and didn't hear. We took a break by a bench that wasn't a bench, just two stones that had fallen against each other. Luis checked batteries. Cal filmed B-roll of our feet moving through piles of leaves. He kept making little jokes, not mean at first. But then we passed a small square stone with no name, just a year, 1927. "Here lies 1927, he said in his fake narrator voice. "They lived a long and fulfilling year." "Stop," I said. "It's not funny. It's light," he said. "We want light. If we're too grim, no one watches." "Say what's on the sign by the gate," I said. "Quite respect. That's the tone." He held up his hands. "Fine, fine." We were at the rear fence when we heard the first sound. It wasn't a scream, not like in movies. It was a voice, high and thin, too far away to be clear but close enough to be in the same air we were breathing. It sounded like a woman asking a question you can't quite catch. We froze. The hairs on my forearms rose in a neat, stupid wave. Louis said, "Power lines," but there weren't any big ones nearby. Cal swung his light toward the back, where the ground dipped and the weeds grew taller than my waist. The air smelled sweeter, like the old flower's water had been changed for a second before it soured again. "Hello?" Luis called. Cal smiled and said, "Is this your grave, ma'am? Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and—" I turned and put a hand on his chest. "Do not," I said. "Do that here." He blinked like I'd slapped him. "Relax." "I am relaxed," I said, though my heart was doing a fast, dumb beat like it was trying to find the door out of my ribs. "Just stop talking." We stood still for a long minute listening. The voice, if that's what it was, didn't come again. Somewhere out on Beach Street, a motorcycle wound up and down like a mosquito. Luis lifted the camera again and tried to reframe, but his hands weren't steady. "Let's head back," I said. "We got enough." "5 more minutes," Luis said. "We haven't even done the EMF thing." I said, "Fine, 5. We were cutting diagonally toward the center when Cal stumbled in a soft spot and swore. He had stepped on a sunken corner. The ground gave, and his foot went into the ankle. He pulled free with a wet sound, and I heard something scrape under his shoe. He looked down, and his face changed in a slow way that made my stomach go hollow. A little rectangle was poking up, the edge of a small metal box, the kind relatives sometimes leave. There were photos in it, damp but layered carefully, the kind with white borders. A tiny shoe, the size of your palm. A lock of hair in a bow. Cal had crushed the corner of the box and the hair was seeping out like a spill. I didn't think. I dropped to my knees and pushed the stuff back in with both hands. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I meant it to whoever had put the box there, to the ground, to the air. I pressed the dirt back over it with my palms. My fingers found something smooth, a marble, and I set it on top like an apology. Cal said nothing. He was breathing loud. Luis turned the camera off without a word. We left after that. We didn't say we were leaving. We just all pointed our lights toward the gap in the fence and walked. As we passed the flags by the front, the little plastic poles clicked against each other in the wind like teeth. The chain link squealed as we ducked under. We didn't look back. Luis messaged me at 12:24 a.m. "Footage looks good." That voice came through. Not crazy clear, but it's there. I told him not to post it. He said he'd think about it. The next morning, Hannah asked why there was dirt under my nails. I said I'd been gardening. The lie felt dry in my mouth. On Monday, Luis texted that he had a headache. "Like a hangover, but I didn't drink," he wrote. I told him it was probably the screen time. On Tuesday, he said it felt like the flu, no fever. On Wednesday, he sent me a voice note. His voice sounded rubbed raw. "I keep hearing that sound," he said. "The not scream. It's like a question I can't make out. It's worse at night. Take the video down." I typed, then deleted it, then wrote, "Get some rest." He didn't post the video. He hadn't edited it yet. Instead, he sent me short clips in the middle of the night. 30 seconds of that dark ground. The flashlight beam wobbling, the texture of leaves. In one clip, the audio had a steady click under everything, like an old wall clock you can't find. He said it wasn't in the raw file. It only appeared when he played it back after midnight. I told him to stop listening to it at night. On Thursday, Cal called me. I almost didn't pick up. He said, "Hey," and then didn't talk for a second, just breathed. "You feel weird?" he asked finally. "Weird how?" "Like something's walking behind you at the exact distance your shadow ends." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said, "What's going on?" He told me his throat hurt. He said he had started coughing this dry, papery cough that didn't bring anything up, like his body was trying to fold in on itself. He said the sound at night made him think a word was stuck in the room. He sounded scared in a way that made me angry at him for the jokes he'd made. "Go back," I said, before I knew I was going to say it. "What?" "Go back and say sorry," I said. "I know how that sounds. But do it. Leave something. Fix the box if you can find it. Just do it." There was silence. He said, very low, "I can't go there." "I'll go with you," I said. We drove at dusk because neither of us wanted to be there in the dark, but we didn't want other people to see us either. Cal brought flowers he grabbed from a gas station, the kind wrapped in crunchy plastic. On the way, he kept clearing his throat in a small, painful way. He looked like he hadn't slept. I brought a little metal tin I found in Hannah's junk drawer and a roll of waterproof tape. At Pinewood, the air was still. The mosquitoes were out, but not bad. A jay's cry clanked somewhere above. We went in the same gap. Cal's hands shook when he pulled the fence up for me. Inside, the ground gave exactly the same way, that slow bounce. I could feel the way it remembered us. We went to the spot like our feet had a map. Luis wasn't answering texts, but I kept checking anyway. We found the little depression where the box had been pressed up and the marble I'd placed on top. The marble was gone. I knelt and pushed the dirt back again, slower this time, and found the edge of the metal. We didn't open it all the way. I didn't need to see the things in there again. I used the tape to bind the crushed corner so rain wouldn't get in. Cal set the flowers down. The plastic wind ruffled against the leaves with a brittle laugh. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked. He looked at me like he expected me to laugh at him. "I didn't. Me too," I said. "We were idiots." We stood there quietly after that, both feeling like we should say more but not knowing how to not make it worse. Then Cal said, "Do you hear that?" I didn't at first. Then I did. A soft hiss around us like grass talking. It wasn't the wind. The trees weren't moving. It sounded like when you hold a shell to your ear as a kid and you hear your own blood. The sound wrapped around us like a thin net. It made my skin try to lift away from my bones. "We should go," I whispered. Cal nodded. We turned. We took maybe 10 steps when something moved in the corner of my eye. Not a shape, not even a shadow. Just a denser part of the air that seemed to hold its own outline for a second after the rest of the world changed. Cal flinched so hard his shoulder hit mine. "Okay," he said. "Okay," we walked faster. The hiss followed, not louder, just there, like a whisper you can't shake because it's underneath your own voice. At the fence, Cal ducked too fast and caught his shirt on a wire. It tore with a sound like paper. He made a choked, frustrated sound and ripped free. We didn't talk until we were in the car with the doors locked. I know door locks don't stop anything real, but my hand went to it anyway. "Do we tell Luis?" Cal asked. "He already knows something," I said. "I'll go check on him after I drop you." I drove him home. He lives in a small place off Mason, a single story with a big camphor tree out front that drips sap on your windshield if you park under it. He thanked me like a guy who doesn't say thank you much and left the flowers plastic in my passenger footwell by accident. I threw it away at a gas station. Luis didn't answer his door. His car was in the lot. I called him 6 times and banged on the door until the lady in the next unit opened her door and stared at me. She called the landlord. The landlord had a key. Inside, Luis was in bed, eyes open. He was alive, breathing, but he looked past me like I was someone standing behind myself. His phone was on the pillow next to him, open to the voice recorder app. The last file was 12 minutes long and titled just Uri. I didn't listen to it. I called 911. He went to Halifax. They said dehydration, exhaustion, probably a virus. They said it didn't look like a stroke or a heart attack. They said fluids and rest. He went home Thursday. He said he felt less heavy, like a wet coat had dried on his shoulders. He didn't talk about the cemetery. He didn't ask for his camera back. It sat on his kitchen counter like an animal sleeping with its eyes open. I thought that was the end. You like neat arcs. You do a dumb thing. You say sorry. You get spooked. You go home. But the hiss didn't stop. That whisper sound in the grass. I started hearing it in places where there wasn't grass. Standing in line at 7-Eleven, in the hotel's back hallway where the ice machines thrum, in my own bathroom with the shower running. It wasn't loud. It was just there, underneath everything else, holding on. Sometimes it swelled for a beat, and I thought I could almost pick words out of it, like when a radio station comes into range and then vanishes again. Always, when it rose, I felt that soft give of pine wood under my shoes, as if the tile in my kitchen had memory. 2 nights ago, Hannah called. The kids were asleep and she was half whispering. She said she'd heard something outside like a woman talking on the sidewalk. She looked, but there was no one. She laughed after she said it, embarrassed. I said it was nothing. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time with my lights off and my phone face down so the glow wouldn't catch. The hiss in the apartment seemed louder then. It had a rhythm to it, not like a voice, but like someone breathing who never needs to take a breath. I drove by Pinewood last night without getting out. I told myself it was just to see it in the daylight fading, to prove it was a place with squirrels and spiders and cheap beer cans, not a mouth in the dirt. The chain link was still slumped. The flags clicked again in the small wind. In the back, the oak was a blacker shape against the dark. As I idled with my window down, I heard it again, higher than the hiss, that almost voice sound, like the breath someone takes before asking you for a favor they know you won't grant. I thought about getting out and going to the spot again, lifting the dirt and taking the little box home and cleaning it and finding a better box and bringing it back and setting it carefully and saying all the right words. But there are no right words. There are only the ones that feel like begging, and I don't know who I'd be begging to. Something else. I found the marble. Not at Pinewood. It was on my kitchen counter this morning, dead center, as if someone had placed it there with 2 fingers and love. I don't own any marbles. I didn't touch it. I left it there and went to work and did not come home for lunch. I don't know what the curse is. Maybe it's not a curse. Maybe it's just gravity for the kind of attention we brought. I know people say if you mock the dead at Pinewood, you get sick. Cal's cough got better after we went back, but some nights I dream I can hear him coughing outside my bedroom window, and when I get up and look, there's a droplet on the glass. Not like condensation, but like someone tapped there with a fingertip to get my attention. When I wipe it away, the glass is warmer where the drop was, as if a mouth had been close. Luis texted me this morning. Think I'm going to delete the files. I told him that was a good idea. He said, I think I recorded something in my sleep. I didn't ask what. He sent me a screenshot of a voice note. 3:03 a.m., 9 minutes, no title. He said he hadn't listened. Neither have I. He asked if I wanted to come over. I told him I couldn't. I was at work. That was true, but it wasn't the truth. I drove by Pinewood again on my way home like an idiot. The gap in the fence is smaller now. Someone wired it up with a twist of metal. The flags by the front are gone. The bench that's not a bench is still there, stones leaning against each other like 2 people who have known each other too long to need words. I didn't get out. I rolled my window down just enough to let the air in and listened. The hiss was there, of course. It's always there now. Under it, for a second, I heard that high, thin knot scream again, just a thread through cloth. It wasn't angry. It wasn't kind. It sounded like a woman saying my name in a room down the hall. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and didn't look in the rear view once. At home, the marble was still in the center of the counter. I stepped around it like you step around a spot on the floor you've convinced yourself is wet. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I wrote this. People will ask for proof. I have none that will convince you. A photo of a marble on a counter is a photo of a marble on a counter. A recording of a hiss sounds like a fan or the ocean in a shell. A hospital admit sheet says dehydration. A torn shirt says carelessness. A box under dirt is a box under dirt, and there are fewer of those than you think. Most families don't leave things like that because they know animals dig and strangers exist. This isn't a warning so much as a request. If you go to Pinewood, keep your mouth shut. Don't make it content. Don't say the funny thing you'll get tired of hearing in your own voice later. If the ground gives under you, step back and put it right. If you find a marble, leave it where it is, or if you take it, be ready for where it might follow you to. And if you wake up at 3:03 a.m. to your phone recording on its own, don't listen to it alone. Don't put it on speaker. Don't let it touch the air of your kitchen. Don't give it your name to hold. I can hear it now. The hiss under the fridge, the whisper in the AC vent, the breath inside the word sorry. It's not getting louder. It's just getting closer to the shape of my own breath. I think that's the part people mean when they say curse. Not the punishment, but the way something starts sounding like you until you can't tell who asked the question first. I'm going to put the marble back on the ground by the fence tonight. I'm going to set it down and not say anything. Maybe that's worse. Maybe it's better. Maybe it doesn't matter. The wind will click the chain link like teeth. The oak will hold up the piece of sky it always holds. Somewhere in the center of the dark, a box will keep its corners as best it can. The air will make that sound that isn't a scream. And if I'm lucky, it will keep sounding like a question that isn't meant for me to answer. I'm not posting this for attention. I'm posting it because I need to write it down somewhere that feels neutral, somewhere that doesn't know me in real life. If you live in Miami and you've ever visited the city cemetery off any 2nd Avenue, the one with the uneven ground and the broken angels, you might recognize some of what I'm about to describe. If you don't, then at least you'll know not to treat it like a location for a cool photo. This happened last September, early hurricane season, right after one of those storms that slows down to insult you. Not a disaster, just enough wind to drop branches and peel old paint. I freelanced as a videographer for a tiny local history channel on YouTube. It was me, my friend Danny, and her older cousin Mateo. We made short pieces about overlooked places, faded hotels, weird roadside shrines, that kind of thing. We were careful to be respectful. If a place was sensitive, we got permission. People in the comments called us Urbex Light, which was fair. The Miami City Cemetery was Danny's idea. She said the storm had knocked debris into the older sections, and the caretaker put a call out for volunteers to help clean and document damage for grants. We could film a respectful mini-doc about restoration and tell some of the family's stories, especially in the older black section that always gets less attention and funding. In other words, good intentions. The caretaker, Mr. Alvarez, was into it. He liked that we weren't there for ghost content. "You won't be the first chasing whispers," he told us on the phone, "but you can be the first who actually brings gloves." We met him on a Tuesday around noon. The sun was knife-bright on the white marble, and the air smelled like that sweet rot trees have after rain. Mr. Alvarez was in his 60s, thin, with a ball cap that said City of Miami in faded letters. He kept jangling a fat ring of keys like the noise was a habit. He showed us the office, a cinder-block room with a desk fan that never stopped. On the wall behind the desk was a framed copy of an old cemetery map, yellowed, the edges burned-looking. A thick pencil line split it in two. "You know what that is," he said. Back then, they liked their lines straight. He walked us out and, without making a speech of it, pointed to the left, the older white section with ornate family plots, and then to the right, the older black section with simpler stones and more earth graves. The grass grew different heights on either side. I don't mean the city neglected it on purpose. It just did, because that's how neglect looks when no one budgets for evenness. We started in the southeast corner where a big ficus had lost half a limb. Mateo and I hauled branches off the stones while Danny filmed a slow pan of sunlight through the leaves. Mr. Alvarez kept his distance, talking to another volunteer near the gate. The air felt heavier over there, like the sun couldn't finish its job. When the wind lifted, it had that hot asphalt taste you get in Miami no matter how green the view is. The first odd thing happened right away, and it was so small we almost didn't register it. We found a little circle of chicken bones near a headstone, cleaned and arranged like a tiny wreath. In the middle was a paper cup with something burned to ash inside and a smear of red wax that had run down the stone. It wasn't theatrical or movie voodoo. It was cheap, practical. Danny filmed around it respectfully and whispered, "Offerings. People still come at night," Mateo shrugged. "As long as they respect the dead." We kept working. We filmed Mr. Alvarez showing us an above-ground vault that had lost a piece of its plaster. He told us the cemetery dates, the epidemics that got everyone in waves, the families that moved, the markers that broke when no one could afford to fix them. When he talked about the two halves, he didn't get political. He just said, "This line is older than all of us," and pointed to a row of stones aligned like teeth. It was an actual boundary, same orientation as the map line. On that row, directly on the line, I noticed something scratched into the concrete curb. Not words. Short lines crossed through with shorter lines like a child's tally marks. 5, then 10, then another 5. I said something about graffiti, and Mr. Alvarez frowned. "Those weren't there Sunday," he said. "Kids." I bent down with the camera to grab a close-up and my breath fogged the lens for half a second. That made no sense. The air was humid, but not cold. Danny made a face. "You feel that?" It was a pocket of cool, like standing in front of a refrigerator someone just opened. When I say strange, I don't mean lights in the sky. I mean things that, in the moment, read as slightly wrong and only later arranged themselves into a pattern. That's how it started. Little wrongs. We worked 2 more hours. We picked up blown plastic and a single flip-flop that didn't match anything. We tied black crepe streamers that had blown off someone's memorial back to their sticks. A woman in scrubs cut across the cemetery on her way to the bus and nodded to us like any park path. A man with a plastic bag sat on a low wall and watched us without moving much. Background Miami. Around 3, Danny suggested we get some B-roll of the white marble angel near the front. She wanted that shot where the sun flares around the wing and the shadow cuts across the name. Mateo was wiping sweat with his shirt and said he'd stay by the truck to go through the shot list. We split up, never very far, just enough to feel alone in your own task. I followed Danny across the line without thinking about it and felt that sudden cool again on my shins like wading into ocean shallows. The air on one side was 20% heavier, 20% dimmer, as if the sun had to cross some invisible curtain. Not enough to say anything about. Enough to make you look up and wonder if a cloud passed. It didn't. Danny, who is the type to banter with nothing, said, "Okay, that's weird, but I'll take free AC." She stepped up to the angel and framed her shot. The name on the base was from 1913, a baby who didn't live a year. Someone had tucked a blue pacifier behind the folded stone hands. That image would sit in my stomach later like a stone. When she hit record, the shotgun mic we use for clean ambient started picking up something that wasn't wind. It was a whisper, but not a word, like a dry brush being pulled across paper. We get radio ghosts sometimes. Cheap mics love to flirt with frequencies. She lowered the camera and it stopped. She raised it and it started again. "Not creepy yet, just annoying. Let me switch inputs," she said. She did, and the whisper continued, steadier, like surf in a shell. She moved the camera to the left and it got quieter. She moved it back to the angel and it got a bit louder. I put my ear to the microphone like an idiot. I could have sworn I heard an S, like shh, but it was barely there. Danny frowned and said she'd fix it in post. We walked back toward Mateo. He was standing on the curb by the line again, staring down. "Okay, not funny," he said without looking up. "Which one of you did this?" Someone, somehow, had chalked 3 names on the curb where the tally marks were. Not carved, chalked in white chalk that must have come from a schoolroom or a bored kid's pocket. The names were Mateo, Daniela, and under them, in smaller letters, Lucas. That's me. The chalk was thick and fresh. My first thought was that Mr. Alvarez wrote our names to mark where he wanted us to film, like a blocking note. Then I noticed the handwriting. It was not adult. The lines were thick and a little off, like the person didn't know cursive and wrote all caps from memory. The chalk dust had fallen into the tiny cracks and looked like frost. Mr. Alvarez swore under his breath when we showed him, "I've been by the gate this whole time. I would have seen somebody." He glanced toward the man with the plastic bag who had moved closer. The man pointed at the line of names and shook his head like, "Don't look at me." "Kids from the school cut through sometimes," Mr. Alvarez said, trying to file it. "They like to spook. They're good kids, mostly." He rubbed the heel of his hand over the names and the chalk smeared into a soft blur. "Don't film this," he told us, voice flat. We didn't. At that point, we should have packed up and come back another day. But the light was beautiful and our schedule was tight. And we had an interview with an elderly woman named Mrs. Reed arranged for 4 o'clock. Her parents were buried in the black section. She wanted to talk about the segregated funerals and how people made something holy out of what they were allowed. She arrived in a taxi, short and straight-backed, with a hat that made her look like every photo of a Sunday worth showing off. We mic'd her up and she led us to the plot. The ground was soft where the storm had soaked it through. She touched the headstones like faces and told us stories. She never raised her voice. Twice during the interview she paused and asked, "Do you hear that?" We said no. She shook it off both times. Later, on the edit, both pauses lined up with faint, almost subliminal whispers in the background track. I know because I stared at the waveform until I saw their damp little hills. If you boosted the audio too much, it just became noise. But at normal levels, if you knew where to listen, you could hear it brushing the silence like someone dragging a finger along a wall. We wrapped at 5. The sun slid down and the air shifted to that Miami dusk where the heat doesn't leave. It just stops attacking. We helped Mrs. Reed to her taxi and she said as the door closed, "Don't linger." People say things like that to make the past feel tidy. We nodded and waved and pretended the words were just words. We were almost out. Almost. Mateo went back to the truck to move it closer to the gate. I went into the office to refill a water bottle and leave a copy of the release forms. Danny said she wanted one last shot, just the line where the grass changed color and the light got weird. 30 seconds, she said. The office smells like fan motor and coffee grounds and paper that's been breathed on for 100 years. On the shelf behind the desk was a ledger book the size of a pizza box. The cover was cracked leather and the page edges were brown and feathery. It wasn't locked. I didn't mean to snoop, but the thing looked like it wanted to be opened. I told myself I'd film a quick cutaway of the old script as a visual. Mr. Alvarez wouldn't mind if I didn't show names. I flipped it open to a middle page and did not understand what I was looking at for a moment. The handwriting was old, slanted, and precise. The entries were columns: name, date, section, plot. Then, at the very bottom, under a line that separated long ago from later, there were 3 new entries in a different, heavier pencil. The graphite was shiny like it hadn't fully set. The names were the same 3 from the chalk, too neatly copied to be coincidence: Mateo, Daniela, and Lucas. The dates line was blank at first glance, and then in tiny digits, someone had written 0913 in the far margin like an aside. That was the day we were there. I shut the book so hard the desk fan rattled. When I looked up, Mr. Alvarez was at the door. He had a way of arriving without a sound that I would have admired in another context. "Don't," he said, and it wasn't angry. It was tired. "People leave us things. We don't invite it. We don't write it down." "I didn't," I started. He held up a hand. Keys swung by the gate. "I'll lock up now." His voice was normal. Too normal. It scraped against something in me that wanted to say nothing has happened. We are all fine. I ran out to find Danny and tell her we were done. Dusk had thinned to that blue that makes shadows look thick. I saw her by the line, the camera in her hands, the little red record light a dot in the dim. She wasn't filming the grass change. She was filming toward the north fence where the oldest headstones lean like they're listening. She didn't turn when I called her name. When I got close, she said, "Listen." We both stood there. I couldn't hear traffic anymore. I couldn't hear the fan in the office. I couldn't hear our own footsteps. The world had gone cotton. Out of that muffled air, very soft and thin, like it had fought through something to reach us, came my name. Not the way a friend says it. Not the way a stranger asks for it. The way you hear it when you're half asleep and someone stands in your doorway and doesn't want to scare you. "Lucas," it said, like it was trying to be careful. Then it said it again from behind us, a little closer. "Lucas." Danny's hand found my wrist and held on hard. The skin of my forearm went tight like a cat's back. "Mateo!" I shouted, ugly loud, to shatter it. He jogged up from the truck, annoyed. What? Why are we yelling?" His voice broke whatever the air was doing. Traffic came back, the fan. A distant siren improvising its scale. We looked at each other and laughed in the way you laugh when you've been almost in a car accident. "We're done," Danny said. "I'm done." We walked to the gate together. Mr. Alvarez was there, locking the pedestrian chain. The sky had gone deeper. We piled into the truck with that quick relief you get sliding a door shut, like glass is proof against anything. The relief lasted until we got to the gate. The chain swung once, twice, the way a loose thing does. And then it snapped tight. Not with a human hand. Not with a key. It just stopped. Mateo put the truck in park and got out. He jiggled the chain like everyone jigs a locked thing as if there's a trick. Mr. Alvarez, who had just locked it, stared at his hands. "I didn't do that," he said. He fumbled with his keys and dropped them. I was out of the truck by then. Danny stayed inside with the camera still on her shoulder. She kept filming, maybe as a life raft. "Give me the keys," Mateo said, not unkindly, reaching for them. Mr. Alvarez flinched. "I don't," he started and then stopped. "I can't say this right without making it sound like a jump scare, and I promise not to do gore or cheap shots, so I'll just say what it was. It was a stillness. A brief, total stillness like when a power outage happens and your house makes a sound of its own stopping. In that stillness, the air got very close to our faces. And then, from the line behind us, from that curb with the smeared chalk, came a second voice that was not my name. It said, very politely, "Excuse me." It was Mrs. Reed's voice. Perfectly. She had been gone an hour. It was the way she'd said it when she wanted us to follow her down a row. "Excuse me," it said again, and then it clicked through 3 other people we had spoken to that day. Mr. Alvarez from the morning, a volunteer, a man who asked us for the time as he crossed the path. Each voice said a different thing that those people had indeed said earlier. Each was exact, like a recording that played out of a throat. Danny from inside the truck whispered, "That's a crow thing. Mimic birds. We have those here, right? Do we have those here?" She already knew we did not like that. Not like tapes of our day laced together and thrown back at us. Mr. Alvarez made a small, helpless gesture and then, very carefully, as if not to attract attention, knelt to pick up his keys. His hand shook and the keys chimed against each other like nervous teeth. The chain came loose. I can't explain it better. 1 second it was taut. The next it sagged into his hand. He fumbled it open and swung the gate wide. He didn't look at us. "Go," he said, his voice thin. Not to us and not to anyone. Mateo drove. We didn't talk. I filmed the gate as we rolled through without thinking. The camera's red light blinked like a pulse. On the way home, we tried to rationalize. It's the oldest human skill. The whispers were wind. The name was a trick of selective hearing. The voices were, what? Someone messing with us? A prank? A Bluetooth speaker under a bush? We watched the footage that night like teenagers replaying a dare. The ambient mic audio had a pitch to it, a kind you don't get from wind, like a breath across the edge of a bottle. When Mrs. Reed paused, you could just make out the soft drag of something syllabic. At the gate, the camera pointed straight at the chain as it went slack. No human hand, no edit. We scrubbed frame by frame and found nothing. The only thing out of place in the image was us. We didn't upload any of it. We decided, not for clicks, not for views, not for someone's Facebook aunt to write demons in the comments. Danny sent Mrs. Reed a bouquet and a thank you note for her interview. I wrote Mr. Alvarez an email apologizing for poking around his ledger and never got a reply. That should be the end. I wish it were. 2 days later, I came out to my car and found a film of dirt on the passenger floor mat. Not the normal crumbs of life. Fresh soil, gritty and damp. It had a smell I recognized immediately. Grave dirt smells like shade and old pennies. If you grew up near a cemetery, you know it. I cleaned it up, made a joke in our group chat. Danny sent back 3 clown emojis and then a picture of her own doormat dusted with the same fine soil. Mateo didn't reply for a while and then sent a thumbs up, which is how he says he's not saying anything. That night, someone left a photo on my doorstep. An old Polaroid, its white border gone tea brown. It showed the north fence of the cemetery, where the oldest stones lean. The angle was wrong for a tourist. It was low, like a child or someone kneeling. In the corner of the frame, half cut off, there was a shape that might have been me, from behind. My t-shirt, their exact blue. The picture had the same faint chalk dust fingerprints on the border that the curb had had. I didn't call the police because what would I say? Someone has access to a time machine and a chalkboard. I put the Polaroid in a zip bag and slid it in a drawer. I told myself if I ignored it, its power would shrink. This is the other oldest skill humans have. We starve the thing that scares us and hope it leaves. It has not left. It has only learned to use names. 2 weeks later, I was in line at a cafecito window on NW 36th, and my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number that showed up as City of Miami. I let it go because everyone knows those calls are for permits or water bills. When I checked the voicemail, there was no person on the line. There was wind. And then, clear and close as if someone had their mouth right up against the microphone, a woman's voice said, "Excuse me." It was the exact tone. I deleted it with shaking fingers and then emptied my trash. The call log kept the number anyway, like a chalk line you can't scrub out. We never went back during the day. I did, once, at noon on a bright Wednesday, with other people around and a church group doing a cleanup, and Mr. Alvarez not in sight. I walked the path like a man in a museum, hands in pockets. I pretended to be looking for a relative so no one would ask questions. The line was still there, grass 2 colors. The curb was clean where the names had been, but I could still see them if I let my eyes unfocus, the way you can see a picture inside those magic eye books. Someone had left a waxy red smear on a headstone near the angel. It had hardened into a shape almost like a tongue. On my way out, I glanced into the office through the screen door. The ledger sat on the shelf in plain view. A sticky note with a polite, "Please do not touch," had been half peeled up by the fan's wind. I stood there a full minute and then, like a thief, stepped inside and lifted the cover. I turned pages faster than I should have. The handwriting marched on, beautiful as ever. When I got to the section where our names had been, I let my finger hover, ready to touch and tell myself I'd imagined it. The page had been torn out. Not cut, torn with a ragged white edge like a tooth broken in candy. Below, a new page started with a neat ink line and older names. Someone had tried to clean an error by removing it. They had left the scar. I closed the book. The room felt hot again, normal. A man's voice behind me said, "We closed," and I jumped. It was a city worker with a clipboard wanting to check something about the irrigation. I smiled too hard and said I was just leaving, and he said, "Cool," and the sky beyond him was the perfect blue of a screensaver. The world held. I told myself we were done, that some places take more than they give and you have to let them keep it. We pivoted to other videos. Mateo filmed an old barbershop. Danny interviewed a woman who bakes empanadas out of her house with the city's blessing. We avoided conversations that started with, "Remember when?" A month passed. Then Mateo texted a picture to our group. A low concrete marker, newly set, still pale where the cement hadn't stained it. No name, just a single word cast in those cheap metal letters you can order online. The word was Luke. "They're missing the last two letters," his message said, forced casual. The ground around it was raw. The background of the photo was the north fence. The angle was low. The timestamp was 7:02 a.m. I called him immediately. He sounded normal, almost cheerful, which is Mateo's version of fear. "I was running," he said. "He doesn't run." I cut through for time. "It's not for you. It's someone else. Luke can be short for—" He couldn't think of another full name, and I couldn't either, not really. "It's fine," he said. "We don't know anything. We still don't. I can list what happened like an accountant. I can hand you all the rational reasons to ignore it. Maybe a kid wrote our names. Maybe someone copied them into a book to spook us. Maybe the chain caught and then released. Maybe a person exactly off-screen threw their voice with a perfect mimicry of a woman in her 80s. Maybe someone knows where I live and owns a flashlight. But when my apartment is quiet and my phone face down and the window AC clicks off for a second between cycles, I sometimes hear my name the way you hear your own blood in your ear. Not loud, a brush, a blown bottle's note, a careful Lucas like it wants me to turn without startling. And sometimes I hear, "Excuse me," in a voice that isn't asking permission at all, but reminding me I gave it. If you go to the cemetery, bring gloves. Don't step on the graves. Don't film what isn't yours. And when the air grows cool on only your shins, like you walked into the ocean in darkness and the first wave found you, do not listen for your name. They say the dead don't care. Maybe they don't. Maybe the line isn't about the dead at all. Maybe it's about who is listening and how many times you allow yourself to be called before the act of answering counts as permission. I haven't been back since Mateo sent that photo. Danny says we should return during daylight with flowers and a donation and set that ledger to rest in a locked drawer. She says doing something is better than letting it echo. She's probably right. But you know how sometimes you drive a road you've driven 100 times and a streetlight you've never noticed before flickers at the exact moment you pass under it. And for the rest of the week, every light that blinks belongs, in your mind, to the same circuit. That's my head now. Everything that pauses is the gate. Everything that whispers is the line. This is me, writing it down here where strangers will think it's a story. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just what happens when you point a lens somewhere that's already watching. If you do go, and a voice you recognize says "excuse me" softly from behind you, don't turn right away. Walk steady. Keep your breath where it belongs. Let the gate swing by itself. And if you find a little concrete marker near the north fence that says El Luke, please don't add the last two letters. Leave the line unfinished for me, just a little longer. I'm not trying to convince anyone to believe me. I just need to get this out where someone else can see it in case I'm not imagining the last part. If you ever visit Bosque Bello Cemetery in Fernandina Beach, especially near dusk, please keep your keys in your hand. I moved to Amelia Island last year because rent was cheaper than Jacksonville, and my sister, Talia, had an extra room. She works doubles at a restaurant on Center Street, always came home tired and smelling like fried shrimp, and she wanted help with utilities. I'd been doing odd jobs, photography gigs, a few handyman things, when I saw a flyer taped to the library door. Volunteer docents needed. Bosque Bello Cemetery Preservation Day. I like old places. I like quiet. Plus, I thought it could help me build a portfolio for historical photography. When I called the number, an older guy named Mateo picked up. He ran maintenance for the city and coordinated volunteers on weekends. "Do you get spooked easy?" he asked, half joking. "Not really," I said, thinking of how I sleep like a rock even during summer storms. "Good. Bring comfortable shoes, a hat, and water." We start at 7. That Saturday, the air was already warm by the time I parked under the live oaks. Bosque Bello was smaller than I'd pictured, tucked into the island, wrapped in live oak limbs heavy with Spanish moss. Beautiful woods fit. Sunlight came down in slants and the ground was soft and sandy, pocked with shells. There was the old section with iron fences and graves from the early 1800s, and a newer section with flat markers and fresh flowers. A low wall separated them, like a line between two different kinds of quiet. There were about a dozen of us. A lady from the Historical Society named Dana handed me a clipboard and a laminated map. "You'll be with me," she said. "We're inventorying the older stones, cross-referencing names with county records. If you've got a camera, that's perfect." She had one of those practical, friendly faces that made you feel like you could ask dumb questions. Mateo gave us all a little talk under the shade of a huge oak, where the water cooler was, where to stack branches, how to handle delicate stones. He ended with, "We wrap at 5. The gate gets locked at dusk. Seriously, don't stay after dark. We've had vandalism. And besides," he smiled like an uncle about to tease, "the fishermen say the dead like to walk when the tide turns." "Creepy," someone said, and everyone laughed. I didn't. The inventory itself was mundane in a nice way. Kneeling to brush sand off names. Dana reading dates, me snapping photos, writing notes about condition. We traded ghost stories because it felt required. She had a good one about a woman who swore she saw a man in a black cloak vanish behind an angel statue. "I think she'd taken a medicinal gummy," Dana said with a grin. Still, little things stood out. In the oldest section, the air changed temperature like ocean breath through a crack. Twice I swore I heard a faint clink like coins, though there was no one near me. We passed the Spanish section, where the stones were simpler, some with names etched in an old hand. Someone had left a string of seashells looped around a cross. The shells tapped together on their own, even though the air was still. At lunch, we sat on the low wall and ate sandwiches. A couple walked by the gate with a golden retriever that was determined not to enter. It planted its feet, tail down, eyes fixed on the line of shade. The man tugged gently, then gave up with a laugh. Okay, he told the dog. "We'll go around." I watched the dog's eyes track the empty path the way a person watches a busy street. "You'd be surprised how many animals refuse the place," Mateo said, handing Dana a bottle of water. "And how many people swear something followed them to their cars." "Followed?" I asked. "Like an actual person?" "Footsteps," he said. "But no one's there. Don't look at me. This is what folks say. It stops when the engine starts, they say. As if the metal and oil are a door the dead can't cross." Dana rolled her eyes, but she smiled like she'd heard it 100 times. I stayed late that day, later than I meant to, because I wanted to shoot the afternoon light. Bosque Bello is photogenic in a sad way. The moss ash lace, the iron fences like black lace fans, the cracked white stones. I kept telling myself just one more frame. When I looked up, Dana had already loaded her car, and the last volunteer was hugging Mateo goodbye. He put a big key in the gate, rattled it, and looked past me. "You heading out?" he called. "Yeah, I'm right behind you," I said, shouldering my bag. He gave me a thumbs up and latched the gate. By the time I reached my car, the sun had slanted to gold, and the wind carried a briny smell from the river. I threw my gear in the back seat and realized my keys weren't in my pocket. They were on top of a headstone. I could see it in my mind like a photograph. I'd set them there to tie my shoe. I swore, locked the car with my elbow, habit, and jogged back down the path. Here's where I should say it was obvious foreshadowing, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like a small, fixable annoyance, until I passed the Spanish section and something tapped along behind me, soft and out of time with my steps. I turned. No one. The path was empty, the air full of the dry whisper of moss. But the tapping continued for 2 more beats after I stopped. It sounded like someone shadowing me with a half-second delay, as if listening and keeping pace. I told myself it was a branch dropping acorns. I told myself it was the shells on that cross. The keys sat on a white stone with an old name, Alvarez, 1826. As I scooped them up, I noticed a coin at the base, half buried, green with age. A Spanish real, maybe? The edge of it flashed in the last light. For a second, I pictured myself posting a photo of it with a caption, "Found History." But I heard Dana in my head telling me never to pocket offerings. "Leave everything as you found it." "Sorry," I said out loud to the air, because I'm the kind of person who does that. "Just taking these back." I patted my keys and turned to the path. The footsteps fell in again, deliberate and light, a half beat behind mine. I didn't run. There's something about being in a cemetery that makes you pretend you're dignified. But I walked faster than felt normal. The tapping matched me, then closed the distance so it wasn't behind, more like beside. I saw nothing when I flicked my eyes to the left, just a stand of palmetto and a row of stones, names I'd learned an hour ago. By the time the gate came into view, my heart was beating stupidly. The road beyond looked dark, even with cars passing. I told myself, engine. It stops when the engine starts. I don't know why that belief snapped into place like a rule I'd always known, but I held it like a rope in my hand. I walked by a statue of an angel, and something brushed my sleeve, though there was no branch near me. Not a grab, more like the back of the hand touch of someone testing fabric. I didn't look. The gate rattled under my palm and it moved. It wasn't locked. Mateo had left it on the latch. I pushed it open, stepped through, and the air changed. Warmer somehow, like stepping into a kitchen. The tapping didn't follow. I stood there with my hand on the gate, stupid with relief. The traffic muffled as if I'd popped out of a bubble. I laughed, a choked little sound. "Get a grip," I told myself. "You're scaring yourself for nothing." Behind me, very softly, something exhaled. I didn't sleep great that night. My dreams were full of long corridors lined with shells. When I woke, there was sand on the mat inside my apartment door. Talia yelled from the kitchen, "You dragged half the beach in." I was in a cemetery, not the beach. "Then stop walking in your sleep to the beach," she said, and smacked me with a dish towel when I walked past. I went back to Boscobello 3 more times that month. I told myself I was finishing the inventory, but part of me wanted to prove that first evening was in my head. It was different during the day when other volunteers were around. Families came with flowers. A guy in running shorts went past us twice, head down, so locked into his workout that the place was just another loop. On the 3rd Saturday, I met Officer Ruiz. He pulled up in a cruiser and chatted with Mateo near the gate. They were talking about kids who'd been sneaking in at night. "You really lock this at dusk?" he asked. "Dusk," Mateo said. "Unless the tide is up, and then I lock it early." "You and your tides," Ruiz said, amused. Then he looked at me. "You working late again today?" "Probably not. Don't. The calls we get." He made a face. People hearing voices. Somebody whispering their name. Footsteps. Always footsteps. "Do you ever find someone actually there?" I asked. He shrugged. Once it was a teenager hiding with a Bluetooth speaker, trying to freak out his girlfriend. The other times, we find the car. We find the driver 100 yards down the road, swearing they were chased. We never find footprints. He was joking at the end, trying to keep it light, but I noticed his hand stayed on the top edge of the door like he didn't want to make himself too at home. It would have stayed just a weird place I volunteered at. Except for what happened on the last Thursday in September. Dana texted that morning asking if I could meet a woman doing a genealogy project. She wanted to find an ancestor in the older section, and Dana was tied up with a meeting. I said sure. I took my camera even though the sky was a flat, sticky gray. The woman, her name was Carrie, had driven up from St. Augustine with a binder full of photocopies. We walked the rows while she told me about a great something who supposedly jumped ship and married a local girl. She had quick eyes and made little jokes about Spanish pirates, then apologized for romanticizing. I know they were probably just thieves with boats, she said, and I liked her for that. We found her ancestor's stone eventually. Alvarez, the same family name from the day I left my keys. The coin was still there, a darker green now that the light was thin. Carrie started crying in that relieved, embarrassed way people do when a story turns out to have a body. I stepped back to give her space. When she left the flowers she'd brought, the wind shifted. A smell like rope and wet wood rolled through and then went away. We talked for a while by the wall. It was easy to lose track of time when there was no direct sun to mark it. The light went from gray to ash. By the time we walked back to our cars, it felt like holding a book close to your face to read. "Thank you," she said and hugged me. "You were so kind. Drive safe," I said. "And if you ever come back after dusk, don't what?" I almost felt dumb saying it. "Don't stop if you hear something behind you. Just get in your car. Start the engine." She laughed, the kind of laugh that floats because it doesn't want to land. "I won't be back after dusk." She left. The gate clanged softly behind her. I stood there, not moving, holding my keys. There were still a few minutes before full dark, I told myself. I could get one last photo of the oaks. The fog coming in from the river made the place look like a charcoal drawing. I went back in. I didn't even make it to the angel statue before I heard it. Not tapping this time. Footfalls, heel, and then the ball of the foot rolling into sand. Slow, measured, close enough that if I stopped, it took one more step and then stopped too. "Mateo," I called. The sound didn't shift. No human would resist saying something if you said their name like that. I took 2 steps, and it took 2, keeping the same tiny delay as if I were the one echoing it. I cut toward the newer section to make a loop back to the gate. The air felt heavier by the Spanish stones, the way it feels in a room right before someone tells you a secret. I stopped by instinct near the Alvarez grave. The coin was gone. My heart did that sudden jump into my throat. "I didn't touch it," I said, to the stone, to the dark. "I didn't take anything." Another step behind me, just one, close enough that I felt it in the bones of my back like the way you feel a bass speaker. I didn't run. I clutched my keys so tight the teeth cut my palm and I walked. Something matched me. Sometimes it was to my left, sometimes right. Never behind when I turned my head suddenly. Always beside like a companion. I wanted to say out loud I respect this place. I wanted whoever was walking to know I wasn't there to take anything. That I'd put back any part of me that had rubbed off on the stones. But I knew if I spoke, I'd hear something answer. I knew it the way you know a tide will reach your toes if you stand too close to the line where it has already been. The gate didn't move. It was shut and latched and too heavy for the way my hands shook. My keys made a tiny metallic rain sound as they slipped. The footsteps stopped with me. Not out of patience, out of attention, like a held breath. I got the latch up on the second try. The metal squealed and I thought, too loud, too loud, too loud. I walked through and turned to pull it closed. There was a shape between the oaks, not black exactly, but the kind of not color that is what black becomes when your eyes want to make it into something. It was taller than me. If you asked me to describe its face, I'd tell you it had no face, but my heart would remember an impression of features like impressions left in sand. It didn't move. The air around it pulsed once like an almost laugh. I pulled the gate shut. My car was only 20 feet away, but my keys were slick now and every step felt like waiting. The footsteps resumed, not inside the cemetery anymore, but on the road behind me. That's where I stopped thinking. I sprinted. I slammed into the side of my car so hard my shoulder still aches as I type this. The key slid in. The engine coughed and caught. The footsteps stopped. I sat there shaking with the engine idling, headlights shining across the coquina wall. The shape in the trees didn't appear again. The night outside my windshield looked normal. I told myself that was that. I told myself I was fine, that whatever this was, it stayed where it belonged. On the drive home, the streetlights felt weirdly far apart. I got 2 blocks from my apartment before I realized the radio was on, but no sound was coming out. The display showed the station. The volume bar rose and fell when I turned the knob. It was like the car had lost the ability to carry anything except engine noise. I parked close to the stairs and killed the ignition. For a second, I waited for the rest of the sound to return. Bugs chirping, a car turning somewhere, the ice machine click from the gas station around the corner. It all came back slowly, like a room you've been away from too long. I got out with my keys in my fist. There were 3 small flakes of green metal in my palm. They didn't feel like sand. They were too sharp. When I rubbed them together, they left a faint coppery streak. I thought of the coin. Talia. I called when I unlocked the door. You home? Back here, she said. Her voice sounded normal. The kitchen smelled like rice and something buttery. On the table was a mixed drink with 3 melting cubes. She looked up at my face. You look pale. I was stupid and stayed late, I said. It was the truest version of something that wasn't true enough. Just don't bring that stuff home, she said. She meant the mood. She meant the way I can carry a place with me, how it can make our small apartment underwater quiet. That night, I woke to my name. It wasn't a whisper or a shout. It was the way my mother used to say it when she found me making something complicated out of nothing. A full, tired Evan, like a hand on a shoulder. I opened my eyes and saw the shape of the door. I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deciding. Talia, I said, but it wasn't her cadence. Her feet are quick in the night, impatient. These steps were patient. They paused outside my door the way someone clucks their tongue while choosing a candy. My keys were on the nightstand. I fumbled them. It didn't make sense, but I jammed them, ring and all, into the little USB port on a battery pack I use for my camera. It was dumb, like a child making a fort out of pillows. The footsteps withdrew. The room warmed a degree. I slept, holding the keys. I went back to Boscobello one last time, to tell Matteo I couldn't do the inventory anymore, to return the clipboard and drop off the photos I'd promised to edit. I don't think it cares whether you return. I think what matters is how you leave. I waited for him by the gate. He parked, got out, and squinted at me. You okay? Can I ask you a stupid question? I said. He spread his hands. The gate's not open yet. All questions before coffee are stupid. Has anyone ever found a coin missing? After they heard, after the footsteps? This is how I know I didn't make it all up. He looked away the way people look when they're deciding if they want to tell you something true. They used to put coins on the eyes to pay passage, he said. That's one story. Another is that the ones who didn't get paid want to be paid. Another says you shouldn't pick up what isn't yours, or speak to what won't tell you its name. I don't tell volunteers the rules anymore because people either take them as superstition or they try to test them. He took a breath. But there are rules. I'll tell you the only one that seems to matter. Don't stop between the gate and your car. I didn't, I said. I started the engine. He nodded like that meant I'd passed a test. He handed me a styrofoam cup. Take a walk with me anyway. In daylight. Remind yourself it's just a place. We walked under the oaks. The air felt normal. My skin did not. When we reached the Spanish section, I looked down without meaning to. The coin was back on the Alvarez stone. It wasn't the same, not really. I could tell by the scratch on the edge like a bird's beak. But it was back. Someone's family probably placed another, Matteo said. He said it like a kindness. Maybe it was true. I took a photo of the grave from a respectful distance. In the frame, the coin is clear, green, and patient. At the far left edge of the photo, there is a small blur, a smudge the size of a thumb. I didn't see it then. I saw it later, alone, when I blew the file up on my computer. It looks like a piece of cloth moving. like the corner of something that had been beside me but not in front. I don't have a punchline. I don't have a last twist that proves or disproves the thing. I can only tell you what keeps happening. Sometimes when I'm leaving my apartment, I hear footsteps on the breezeway behind me, matching mine. They stop when I unlock my car and start the engine. The other day, I was pumping gas, and the guy at the next pump looked over my shoulder and frowned like he was squinting at a shadow. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" "Like coins. Like somebody tossing a coin in a glass." "Never mind," he shook himself. "Must be this old truck." I keep my keys on a heavy ring now, and I keep a spare in my pocket so there's always one in my hand. If you go to Boscobello, don't be an idiot and wander near dusk. Don't pick up anything. Don't talk if something says your name like it knows you. Don't try to be dignified in a place that isn't interested in your dignity. Walk fast. Don't look back. And for the love of everyone who left their dead there in faith, start your engine before you think you need to. If you time it wrong, the footsteps don't stop. They just step around. They learn the pace of your life. They learn your stairs. The first time you forget your keys, you'll understand exactly what kind of door an engine can be, and how thin the walls become when the beautiful woods are behind you but not done.